Wow, have you heard about this nanotechnology stuff? It's like you eat a robot and it lets you control a drone. Think of the hijinks.
I mean, it seems interesting, but I don't see how it would help you with paranormal research.
Speaking from experience, that's little baby. One time I used a spy drone eye cranial augment to disrupt an election by flying it into polling stations and releasing an EMP discharge.
Chad, can you beam yourself onto my second monitor? It's not really visually interesting if I'm just talking to one guy, you know?
How's this?
Yeah, thanks.
Are you looking to get augmented with nanotech? I know a guy that could hook you up. He's super sick. I think he may be one of the chillest dudes I've ever...
Is it you?
Yeah.
Alright. Me up, let's do this. I need something to motivate me to make content. Or, I want to be able to, fire a laser beam out of my eyes that disrupts commercial airline navigation.
The use of such an ability would violate federal laws and endanger the lives of hundreds.
I guess you're right. I should probably give this more thought before committing to one idea. Oh well. When do we do this?
Already done.
What?
The nanomachines should be working their way through your system now.
How?
I put them in your white monster a few hours ago.
You took advantage of my vices to turn me into some kind of science experiment?
No, I just thought it would be funny.
Funny?
I mean, I guess not haha funny, but in a bleak sense, like a Yorgos Lanthimos film.
Alright, I didn't know you were starting a film head arc as well.
Oh yeah, I have a letterboxd now.
Letterboxd? Damn near Kilderboxed. Will these nanomachines make me funny?
I don't know.
Well, I hope they kick in soon. That would suck if you gave me some bunk nano. Oh my god!
Let's go.
Deus Ex Invisible War is a first-person cyberpunk action RPG and simulator. It was developed by IonStorm and published by Eidos Interactive for the Xbox. And also PC, it says here. In the year 2003. It can't be ignored how important a game Deus Ex proper was, and how difficult it would be to measure up to its heights, its ambition. It harkens back to this idealized version of the AAA game industry that allowed time for creators to dream. Deus Ex came out over 20 years ago and is still an infinitely replayable, complex, atmospheric, and genuinely funny game. Aside from the offensive accents, which are funny, something you'll see repeated in the post-mortem thoughts of Deus Ex's creators is this air of it being driven by ideas and dreams instead of a plan, leaving its design document in the dust. A sequel to Deus Ex was more or less greenlit as soon as the original dropped on Y2K. Man, can you imagine if the release of Deus Ex coincided with the global Y2K collapse? Just force humanity into Tracer Tong's libertarian dark age to sell copies of a game you can't play because the power grids are down. Sell Deus Ex branded soy-based meal supplements that come in a plastic tub, just a fucking bucket of slop for an animal, for the animal that you are. The response was pretty clear and immediate that this was a well worth returning to. Drink full and descend. Even as someone with a softer opinion on the game's flaws, it's difficult not to frame the narrative of Invisible War's development around what went wrong. How were they responsible for one of the most uncompromising galaxy-brained games ever made, and then absolutely slip on a banana peel and fall down a flight of stairs as their shoes fell off? From what I can tell, there are a lot of reasons why that definitely happened, and a couple less convincing contrary theories I have suggesting that they didn't quite fall down the stairs as you'd think, or rather that maybe they did, but they looked really cool doing it. Just as a perfect storm of fortunate events led to the once-in-a-lifetime creation of Deus Ex, some less than ideal, inclement weather heralded the arrival of Invisible War, marked by a fickle, rapidly transforming game industry, an ego-driven office culture, self-doubt, and honestly, from the sounds of it, just peer pressure. The original game was the long-gestating brainchild of project director Warren Spector, and the brain coitus that led to the conception of its sequel seemed to be heavily informed by the success of 2001's Grand Theft Auto 3. Rockstar's massive success with this title seemed to prove to Spector the viability of complex but still pick-up-and-play simulation games that appealed to a mass market.
Players want, a deep simulation that they can interact with however they want, but it validated, the idea that console gamers are as into this as PC gamers always have been.
It's a line of thinking that could be entirely business-minded, just trying to think ahead of the curve for the future of Ion Storm, but could also simply illustrate his misplaced confidence in gamers and their ability to discern between good game and bad game, in thinking them sentient and bipedal instead of invertebrate and brainless. However, Warren Spector would not act as project director this time around. In the refractory period following Deus Ex, he would wander off to pursue new ventures, glowing, leaving the keys to the franchise in the hands of lead programmer Harvey Smith, while he took on more of a hands-off consulting role. This time around, he just wanted to watch. During this time, an elite task force within Ion Storm would be dispatched to begin the formidable task of porting Deus Ex to the PS2. The renamed Deus Ex: The Conspiracy would teach the team a valuable lesson about sacrifice, about what parts of an immersive simulation game could be surgically removed without killing the body, a fixation on reducing granularity and making good use of smaller spaces instead of struggling to make use of larger spaces, hopefully mirroring GTA 3's user-friendly controls and simple, straightforward systems, and other terms that infantilize gamers as one should. Baby want emergent gameplay.
Here's the deep dark secret. I played one PC game from start to finish last year. I played so many more hours of console games last year than I did PC games, it's not even funny.
Seeing these words come straight from his mouth and seeing his excitement in the project rattled what faint bitterness I had. I hate to say it, but it makes sense. You know what, actually I'm sort of indifferent to saying that. Either he's great at selling it, or his infectious passion for game design is so endearing that it overpowers me, and god dang it, I don't know myself around him. This port would serve as the trial run for Invisible War, and embolden Spector and the devs to continue tinkering with a console-first Deus Ex title. At E3 2002, Ion Storm formally announced Deus Ex 2 and Thief 3, and to everyone's confusion, that both would be coming to Xbox and PlayStation 2 before being ported to PC. I feel like some of this decision may have been informed by the success of GTA 3, but in listening to the post-mortem thoughts of its creators, it's clear there was plenty of internal pressure to, and it pains me to even say this, even though a strong case could be made, but fix Deus Ex. In the outside world, it seemed like Deus Ex was a success in every regard, critically, financially, spiritually, because it was. But inside Ion Storm, it doesn't sound like that was the story. It doesn't sound like they ever really got to celebrate the win that Deus Ex was, because that was not how their peers viewed the game.
We listened to our super hardcore friends who told us, here's how I would fix Deus Ex, and we really felt sensitive about that. We really felt like we're not meeting the demands, or we're not meeting the standards of our very intelligent designer friends.
You can absolutely read this in the press leading up to Invisible War. This near embarrassment with the franchise's first entry and air of getting it right this time. There's an interview with Harvey Smith where he brings up this moment where he was watching the making of documentary about The Lord of the Rings, and they showed a clip of the creators accepting a BAFTA, and he realized, hey, we got one of those things. Is that like a big deal? Do we make a good game? As someone who laser focuses on criticism and sees praise blur into their peripheral, I guess it makes sense that with such a meaningful creation, they'd simply want to remedy the perceived wrongs of Deus Ex. But there are certainly a few of these where they've clearly taken what I, a mere player, a consumer of a product, would describe as the wrong lesson. It doesn't instill confidence that you'd sell me the sequel to a game I like by putting down the game I liked. After his worm-tongued coworkers had whispered in his ear for long enough, Warren Spector would come to describe Deus Ex as self-indulgent.
But we threw all these barriers to players getting at all the gameplay goodness we created. Our interface was unnecessarily complex. The terminology we used was a little too polysyllabic.
This time around, a new polysyllabic word would enter the equation that I reckon bore the brunt of a lot of Invisible War's criticisms.
The key is making the gameplay accessible.
This is an interview with Spectre about Deus Ex 2, and aside from dropping the A word, it's interesting hearing him double down on what he thinks a Deus Ex game should be.
It shouldn't be about, oh my god, what a cool puzzle. Wasn't that neat the way the designer created something and I solved it? It should be about you in a game world, interacting with that game world the way you want, making a plan, executing it, and you get to be creative.
Honestly, the design philosophy for Invisible War, at least on paper, sounded nearly identical to the last game, save for that singular objective, which is debatably the shovel that dug Invisible War its place in the franchise, turning it into an invisible game. The plan was simple. Take a franchise that was once borderless, leashed only by the limits of late 90s hardware, and draft its sequel around the alien and stifling confines of a newly released home console, while also greatly advancing its graphic requirements. Oh, also, your team is a bunch of main characters, the lead of which has never directed a game and is actively going through a divorce. Management wants you to take focus testing into account. Everybody says the last game sucked, so this one should be at least better than that one, and whatever date you had in mind to ship it, let's cut that in half.
I feel like we fucked up.
A few devs that worked on the conspiracy would be brought into this mainline entry, and every step of Invisible War's development would be made considering the limitation of its console version, which was amended to be an Xbox exclusive. I'm assuming at some point after the PS2 version was announced, they simply looked at the game, then at the PS2, then at the game, then at the PS2, then the game for a beat longer, then the PS2 for a final time as a bead of sweat made its way down their furrowed brow. It's hard to track down footage of Invisible War's beta outside mosaiced potato camera footage of a show floor monitor, but even through all those layers of interference, you can tell that this was the purest form the game lived in. The rough cut that didn't yet have time to make any number of compromises. Beautiful in that way that only a game from the early 2000s could be, experiencing the fresh pleasure of bump mapping and dynamic shadows. It looks like an honest-to-goodness PC game. However, this was an illusion, but the faint starlight of a world that died long before we'd reach it. In my experience, if you game long enough, you'll likely witness a phenomenon wherein a game comes out, it's well received, you play it, you also enjoy it, and it just kind of sits somewhere in your memory, associated with that momentary jolt of dopamine, for years even, and then something happens. You realize the narrative has changed. While you weren't looking, the world had decided that actually that game you liked is the worst game ever made and you should actively hate it. This was an early example of such an anomaly. Even though we no longer live in the world where Invisible War is considered a good game, there is record of it. On release, Deus Ex Invisible War was met with an oddly understanding, unanimous praise, as if everyone admitted that it was not as complex as the original, yet still one of the best games of the year. GamePro would name it Editor's Choice in their February 2004 issue, writing that, besides its technical issues and stabs for mass market appeal, it's still vastly better than 99.9% of the other games out there today, and with properly calibrated expectations, you'll find that Invisible War is a brilliant game that will captivate you like few others can. A second review for the PC version, within that same issue, would repeat much of the same sentiments, adding, "It's a smart shooter and a thrill-packed stealth game with a little RPG tossed in for good measure. It has its minor drawbacks, but the rest of it is strong enough to definitely be named one of the best games of the year." One of the more contentious critic reviews came from Computer Gaming World, who would take the time to preface their write-up by also putting down the original Deus Ex, insinuating that its cult-like following was misplaced. They would conclude their takedown with, "After a while, every conflict and puzzle in Invisible War begins to feel like a carbon copy of the previous one. This problem dogged the original as well, and it's frustrating that Ion Storm couldn't find a more interesting means of providing both stealth and action." Yeah, if there's one problem I have with the Deus Ex franchise, it's all the fucking puzzles. Right? That was a joke. There aren't any, at least in the first two games. This is the same issue where they gave Silent Hill 3 1.5 stars beneath naming NBA Live 2004 Editor's Choice. But don't fret, gamer. In just 2 years' time, Computer Gaming World would die For this very reason, probably, Harvey Smith would tell GameSpot that while he personally loves the game and enjoys playing it, he doesn't feel like its initially positive response was all that warranted. That it has plenty of issues that he takes full responsibility for due to inexperience as a project lead and overambition. While doing press for Epic Mickey, Warren Spector would say to PC Gamer that there was only one time in his life that he listened to focus testing, and it was with Invisible War. Some marketing team sold him on the idea of setting the next Deus Ex far in the future, and to dress the protagonist in a purple jumpsuit. After admitting this, he apparently buried his face in his hands. I feel for them, because it's like seeing a father who's just learned, their son is a Breaking Benjamin fan. In the years since, Deus Ex Invisible War has become at best forgotten and at worst maligned by the majority of the franchise's fan base. This perception is one from within the niche bubble of gaming, from the abyss of deep lore. In reality, out there, in the dirt of casual gaming, it's more likely that the prequel games, following Adam Jensen, are seen as the only existing entries. It's a weird thought, isn't it? Invisible War is at this moment the ending of the entire franchise. It is the last thing that happens within this alternate reality soft apocalypse world that includes JC, Alex, and Adam, and Ben Saxon, if you know who that is. Everything we know was merely the road to the final shot that is Invisible War, a game so expunged from the conversation that it would be unlikely to hear someone say, "I like Invisible War," without a preceding, "Actually, hot take, guys?" and a corresponding, "Oh yeah, that game." It's that place, the apprehensive recognition, where I dwell. Deus Ex was set in the cyberpunk future of 2052 in a world ravaged by a deadly plague named Grey Death. A pharmaceutical company named VersaLife is the only organization that can produce a vaccine, but its supply is so limited that only those wealthy and in positions of power can acquire it. In the midst of this, a military arm of the United Nations named UNATCO is working with FEMA to distribute the vaccine and is also opposed by a group of secessionists named the NSF, who feel that several parts of the country have been overlooked by the government following extended efforts to relieve the West Coast after a massive earthquake destroys most of it. As the world teeters on economic collapse and is becoming more divided, the Illuminati, the shadow cabal of agents puppeteering world events, experiences its own coup by a splinter faction called Majestic 12. At the end of Deus Ex, the nanotech augmented ex-UNATCO agent JC Denton is led to the remaining Illuminati members with the help of Nicolette Duclair and Chad Dumier, members of a French resistance group named Silhouette, and was faced with three methods of defeating Majestic 12 and its leader, the richest man on Earth, Bob Page. Button 1. JC could listen to a man named Tracer Tong and destroy Area 51, not a home to a crashed extraterrestrial aircraft, but home to a vitally important network hub. Well, to be fair, Area 51 does have grays, but those were the result of genetic experiments by man and used as a propaganda tool to misdirect attention away from what Area 51 actually got up to, which was nanotechnology and viruses and cloning and street sharks. Without this hub, we'd be plunged back into a new dark age as countries and continents are cut off from each other and left without a functioning power grid. While one could see the logic in simply swiping their hand across the chessboard and sending its pieces toppling to parts unknown, it's a future that falls apart under the slightest pushback, and Invisible War does display that the forces of tyranny and oppression, as the incomparable Chumbawamba was quoted as saying, "Once knocked down, get up again." Button number 2, you could listen to Morgan Everett. He wants JC to kill Bob Page and simply return power to the Illuminati, whose leaders have been scattered. They could use Area 51 and the powerful AI they've developed to rule over the planet from the shadows. With JC's assistance, the invisible hand of the Illuminati can bring about a new age of the same shit we've always had. The radical and experimental same old capitalist order of the economy. The game, for as politically malleable as it tries to be, does seem to acknowledge that this is, if not the bad ending, it's certainly the least exciting ending. JC takes his reluctant place amongst the same pantheon of billionaire sociopaths that kicked off this apocalyptic scenario by engineering and weaponizing a virus and tampering with man's genetic code. Button number 3 sees JC merge mentally with the combined forces of both the Illuminati and Majestic 12's AI programs, named Helios. With infinite knowledge and digital omnipotence, JC has the potential to dictate the world's future however he sees fit, and one can only hope that enough humanity remains for his rule to be a benevolent one. Deus Ex Invisible War takes place 20 years after the night one of those choices was made. Only, it seems a little bit of each ending turned out to be true. They kind of all happened. Periodicals about JC and Paul Denton, his brother, paint them as polarizing figures to the public, believed to have both been responsible for resolving the Great Death, but also causing the collapse. Though nobody has seen or heard of them since the ending of Deus Ex, their legacy lives on the lips of conspiracy theorists.
JC and Paul Denton are out there somewhere, people. But I've warned you about this time and time again. We saw this with UNATCO. We saw this with VersaLife. They want to infect us with nanomachines and turn us all into sewer greasels. I will not be turned into a greasel. These are literal cyber demons. By making the New World Order takeover Jewish,
this ending cocktail has been something I'm certain I've described to some as a strength and to others as a failing. On one hand, I think it's brave to try to avoid undermining whichever ending a gamer wound up with after playing Deus Ex, making everyone's experience valid. But it also deletes the biggest thing you had control of in that game story. You got to press the button that decided the ending, and now you're told that, well, actually, a fourth thing happened. We didn't change the button you pressed, we just kind of mashed our hand down across all the buttons, and a bunch of stuff happened that you'll need to play this game to catch up on. The Knights Templar, the financiers of the Illuminati, were already defeated before JC Denton's time, but now they've made a return and have no intention of remaining in the shadows. They've even got public recruiting booths for their holy war on body modification and nanotechnology. While the world is about to release a collective sigh of relief following the collapse, a robed figure steps out onto the streets of Chicago holding a nanite detonator, and with a single press of a button, destroys the entire city. This attack destroys the home and foster family of our protagonist Alex D, a student of the Tarsus Academy, a sort of paramilitary training institute where you're prepared for careers in things like private security or anti-terrorist organizations. Deus Ex as a franchise is notorious for its prescience, for accidentally tapping into some political or social issue that would soon become mainstream and enter the lexicon of non-gamers. One odd example of this is even the term and concept of terrorism. Deus Ex was released in the year 2000 and in part concerns the government orchestrating the destruction of an iconic New York City structure that is then pinned on a group labeled terrorists. The word is then used numerous times to manipulate JC Denton into a zealot-like patriotic allegiance. It's not something I can solely credit to Deus Ex because that game was inspired by the X-Files, which was in turn inspired by real-life conspiracy theories, which were at the time still neat. I live in a future where we had a congressional hearing about UFOs, and it's just like, what does it matter? I'm gonna die with student loans and no health insurance. Cool about there being stuff in the sky that we don't know what it is though, I guess. In between the years 2000 and 2003, a real-life Deus Ex moment happened that made the word terrorist a household term in the US, spurred patriotism and xenophobia, and saw Americans become more surveilled by their government than they ever had been. Invisible War in some ways looks forward, but it also feels more of its era, like it literally caught up with its own pondering. Its marketing even asks how you'll fight the future war on terror. Another terrorist attack, this time pinned on a religious sect, emboldens our younger, more naive avatar to find their place in the fight, unraveling how blurred the lines between each faction you'll encounter are. The intro is already a lot to absorb because this game is a direct sequel, but there's also been a significant time jump which introduced a lot of new players and concepts. Shortly before the destruction of Chicago, Alex is moved to a Tarsus facility in Seattle, Washington, and barely has time to get comfortable in their new home before the building is rocked by an explosion, and Alex is contacted by the Academy's director, Layla Nassif. She wants to catch you up on the attack in Chicago and requests you meet in person. Layla and the sort of private security mercenaries that you could have once called the police all seem to be in agreement to gaslight you about the severity of whatever is happening.
All part of SSC duties. I can't comment except to say the situation will be under control shortly.
Even one of your classmates, Leo Jankowski, just assumes it's some kind of training exercise to see how they'll respond to high-stress environments.
Oh, don't worry. It's just a drill. You want to ball it up? Whoa, shit!
Another student you meet is Billy Adams, the only other one here that seems concerned about their safety and seems to already have had some kind of suspicions about the motives of Tarsus Academy, having been chastised for snooping around Nassif's office. But for a while certainly, Alex is just wandering around like a little boy lost at the mall, with nobody to tell him simply what is going on.
What happened? What was that noise? What about Billy? How bad is it? Do you know what's going on? Any idea what's going on around here? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? By who? Know anything about a Code Yellow emergency?
You must be Alex. I'm Clara Sparks.
Hi, what's going on?
Eventually, the situation can't be hidden from them, and an alarm system is triggered. Tarsus Academy is under attack by a religious sect known as the Order, a sort of universal soup of various faiths, unified under one banner, with a mysterious Francophone leader known only as Her Holiness. Nassif is quick to label them as terrorists and fanatics, when in truth, the idea that they would attack anyone was until now unheard of. Despite all the trainees receiving an order to escape through Layla's office, Billy tells you that she has good reason to believe Tarsus is just going to cut them loose or leave them for dead. She had been contacted by the Order, who explained to them that the students at Tarsus are not trainees, they are test subjects, and while there is chaos, they should just grab as many biomods as they can and bail. Biomods are Invisible War's advancement of augmentation, the body modifications that alter the abilities and appearance of people with access to such things. The nanotechnology behind them has improved such that they come in modular canisters that you know, I don't quite know what you do with them, but I sure do love the noise they make when you put them in whatever cavity was reserved for them.
Oh, hell yeah.
While Deus Ex certainly made strides in emergent gameplay, in accomplishing things your way, its story was kind of rigid. It's a story about someone becoming deprogrammed from their patriotic brainwashing, and that concept is fixed. JC Denton leaves UNATCO because he was meant to leave UNATCO. Throughout his adventure, he's being influenced by different groups to do the thing that would benefit their ideology, and then you make a choice. In one of the more admirable yet still divisive ideas in this game, Alex is much less of a clearly defined character. They're more malleable and bright-eyed, and thus can, from the jump, form alliances with different factions, and that opens pathways to different quest lines. You can also just bail on them for another when you feel like it. I have a few quibbles with how this was implemented, but I can absolutely see why this would be something to strive for, as it is in line with Deus Ex's philosophies. It's a series that so often deals with the themes of being lied to, controlled, or manipulated by systems of power. So naturally, you'd want to leave it up to the player to pick who to side with, who to rebel against. Billy gives you the sales pitch on the Order. They believe in natural balance and see whatever Tarsus's machinations are as a violation of that balance, worth resorting to violence to stop. To prove that what she says is true, she asks Alex to return to their dorm as she cuts the power to the floor, deactivating an illusory ceiling that was really a one-way mirror in front of an observation deck, and a group of lab coat-clad nerds pulling at their collars. A representative of Her Holiness named Lin Mei Chen contacts you through hologram and explains that their goal is merely to liberate people from the programming of Tarsus. Oh, really? Huh. So I guess I'll hear him out. Yeah, excuse me, man. Apparently, the Order goon that was leading this rescue had other plans and splintered from the rest of his flock. Layla tries to keep Alex on board by quickly giving them the rundown of how biomods work and encourages them to take a few. She adds that she believes the Order is attacking them because of their intolerance for corporations and the private security forces that protect them. And this is pretty much the spawn point for those. This game is pretty good at keeping you unsure of every side you're aligned to. Anytime a faction leader says something either logical or genuine sounding, it's followed by something that casts doubt on it. This is shown pretty amusingly when you can choose to protect the lab dorks that were spying on you this whole time from a squad of Order members. Layla assures you that they have a strict policy against voyeuristic behavior, and the only reason they observed trainees was to make sure their biomods didn't cause health issues. And for a fraction of a second, I think, okay, I guess that would be a concern you could have. But as soon as she says that, you find a note left by one of the scientists watching Alex, who complains that they couldn't get an accurate muscle fiber scan due to the fact that they hadn't yet disrobed. They then suggest ordering subjects to shower before briefings so they can scan them. And for me at least, that really feels like there's just no denying how invasive and dehumanizing this organization is. Like, brother, you could have just asked me how I was feeling. You don't have to watch me do my pre-shower stare in the mirror for 30 minutes trying to out-reason dysphoria before relenting with the fatigued. It is what it is. As soon as you step foot onto the streets of Seattle, you're met by guards of a new faction, the World Trade Organization, or WTO. Post-collapse, the WTO, led by Chad Dumier, went from a trade alliance to an attempt at re-establishing law and order in a world that was on the brink of Mad Maxing, offering protection, technology, and access to air travel. In exchange, communities would have to acquiesce to their laws, shady surveillance practices, and accept that those under the protection of their enclaves will live far more comfortably than others.
That's one of them. You'll be safe in the WTO enclave.
Whatever you do, don't go down the inclinator in the lower Seattle. The order terrorists are stronger.
All non-enclave.
Seattle itself has been sliced in half into an upper and lower district. Upper Seattle is a well-manicured, heavily monitored haven for consumerism. WTO enclaves are like Bass Pro Shop pyramids with private security, with Lower Seattle being an extended gutter, neglected, impoverished, and crime-ridden. These two sides are separated by a massive anime elevator called the Inclinator, which is conveniently broken at the start of the game. After fixing it, you could talk to some locals that theorize the Inclinator was intentionally sabotaged as part of the WTO's takeover. In any case, being the cause of such a wealth disparity has made them enemies to the Order as well. This is where the training wheels are taken off and you're just sent on your merry way to creep around air ducts, look at rats, and take sides. The WTO wants you to report to the Enclave at the Seattle Air Terminal. The Order wants you to meet up with them at a church in the lower district. Billy wants you to dig up dirt on Layla Nassif, and this being a Deus Ex game, there are of course a number of only tangentially related tasks you could stumble into if you so choose. There are a lot of side quests that don't entirely impact the main story, but add a fun new detail about how the world has changed since Deus Ex. You can meet up with a new faction called the Omar and help them in exchange for discounts on black market goods. They are a sect of Russian cyborgs, essentially. In order to survive the collapse and an ensuing famine, many took to self-installing dangerous and extreme nanotechnology modifications, taking augmentation to its furthest conclusion by replacing parts of their brain to quite literally establish a hive mind among their ranks. You can get way into greasel pit fighting, making discarded ALF-like transgenics from the destroyed VersaLife Corporation shoot acid at each other and even assassinate one of the combatants to rig the next fight. There is an obvious added strength to the adventure of Invisible War now that there is a greater sense of consequence. How could you ignore it? Every move you make is pissing someone off, and all these people have your number and just chime in to express their disapproval. I can see the power in that, and certainly when I first played this game, it was a more novel experience. I couldn't recall a game that offered these immediate and variable outcomes. But it's not without its share of awkwardness. Helping one faction pisses off another, but they never just lose your number. Every disappointed call is followed by, alright, look, you fucked up this one time, but we can still make this right. Disobey the order long enough and they'll send a death squad to get rid of you, but of course, they're no match for you, so Chen immediately gives a, yeah, and let that be a lesson of what could happen if you keep dodging our calls.
Lol, get fucked.
Deus Ex 2000 seemed jam-packed with ideas, picking and choosing from pop culture and topical politics, all spun into an alt future that didn't shy away from some pretty complicated adult topics. And in some ways, I see Invisible War carrying on that tradition. One of the first conversations you can engage in is with an Order street preacher of sorts that is offering information about joining.
I used to live here and believe everything Dumier said until I realized that enclaves do the real brainwashing, convincing people people it's a free market, where everyone can succeed if they work hard enough, when in fact it's all controlled to keep the wealth in the hands of a select few.
It reminded me a lot of the conversation J.C. Denton has with the secessionist leader he's made to apprehend. That similar sting of a person you'd hate in real life making a great point. But Deus Ex often creates these intentional, I think, paradoxical political scenarios that make you unsure of whose side you're on, second guessing which end to place your chips on. I can't think of another game that would try to paint the fanatical religious sect as the voice of reason, but that was some real shit they just said. But like everything in Invisible War, it's a bit smaller, packaged more economically, and perhaps overly concerned with appeasing more than its niche hardcore audience. So while there are substantially less pointedly political diatribes or insightful questions about transhumanism, war, government corruption and exploitation, corporate power, false flags, cover-ups, they don't feel like they're in the forefront. They are there because this is a continuation of when they were there. But the story offers little examination of those things. However, there are at least two themes the game covers pretty extensively that are still interesting to see a AAA game tackle, and are still relevant all these years later. One of those is the ubiquity and utility of artificial intelligence. This was actually pretty expertly set up in the first game during your conversation with Morpheus, an AI construct used as an amusing trade stimulator, a magic 8-ball informed by the entirety of the internet. In Invisible War, we see how this idea has evolved and how it's been incorporated in subtle yet insidious ways to foster a heavily monitored culture of hyperconsumerism via parasocial relationships. In Club Vox, you meet a pop star named NG Resonance. She's technically a real flesh and blood human being somewhere, but AI copies of her are placed around the planet at little holographic terminals. When we first see one of these, a guy named Bud Puckett is talking to her, and you immediately get like, oh, this guy does this a lot. They have a pretty personal conversation about Bud's life, and NG knows details about his failed attempts at using dating apps.
Tell me about the young woman.
Well, first of all, she wasn't young.
The AI is trying to play therapist and keep him talking, but eventually the conversation becomes really sad when he wonders if the real NG ever sees what her fans tell the hologram versions, to which it just kinda lies and says, oh yeah, she does that all the time. I love my fans. When Alex talks to her, they can ask about the club's VIP area, and if you've already peeked inside, she will be aware of that due to her being an arm of WTO surveillance. They have suspicions about the sorts of illegal activities the club owner gets up to back there, but there aren't any cameras, and without a warrant, they haven't been able to check for themselves. If you wanted to, you could rat on the fact that a couple of Omar have been selling black market goods in there, a tip that will immediately alert the WTO and get the Omar busted, while you receive a cash reward. That's the extent of your interaction with NG here, but it's a pretty sweet way of establishing that all over the world, there are these obsessive fans spilling their darkest secrets to what they think is the well-meaning sexy pop star that they have a two-way relationship with, but may as well be a targeted advertising confessional booth mic'd by the feds, continuing Morpheus's claim that humanity longs to be observed and judged.
I like your music.
I think you're lying.
Hey, I'm a fan. You're not supposed to argue with me.
I'm supposed to make you like me. You like it when I argue.
I guess they half predicted that people would be into this, but way overestimated the standard of realism that consumers would be willing to throw credits at.
Hey haw, got me feeling like a cowgirl. Ice cream's so good. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Gang, gang. Gang, gang. Oh, thank you, Alex. This is so cool. Gang, gang.
I came across a few interviews in which Harvey Smith and gang seemed really excited about how Alex's gender would alter your experience in the game. And aside from being correctly gendered by characters, Club Vox is one of the few areas where I noticed a substantial plot change between the different Alexes. At the bar, you can find a guy named Lionel. As Lady Alex, if you approach him, he's immediately irritable, wants nothing to do with you, because he's in the middle of cooking up some kind of scheme against the Minister of Culture. Lionel claims the minister stole his design for a sculpture and he can no longer afford to live in the WTO enclave, meaning he'll be exiled to Lower Seattle. To settle the score, he wants to steal this guy's art collection. If you're Guy Alex, Lionel says nothing to you until you speak with the minister, who asks if you tell Lionel that he wants to invite him to his penthouse to discuss his sculptures. If you do this, the minister then asks if you'd like to discuss sculptures as well. So he could discuss one sculpture with Lionel and then another either with Alex or just the three of you talk about the sculptures at the same time. I mean, I guess you don't have to work out the specifics right now, but you know, people take on different roles in these conversations about sculptures, so there will be some, you know, hierarchical configuration of sculpture discussion. Agreeing gets you the key to his penthouse, whereas with Miss Alex, I don't know, you'd have to buy the key or find your way through ventilation shafts to get in and rob him. Considering how low the bar was at the time, I guess it's impressive for 2003 that 1, they didn't have the feminine Alex be the one that can offer to sleep their way into a locked room, and 2, that these gay characters were not played for a laugh but just a normal part of life not worth examining. If anything, the funny part of this is Alex trying to play along in that charming monotone way only a Deus Ex character tends to.
I would love to be your chamber boy.
Incidentally, you don't actually interact with them again, so like the possible three-way doesn't have a conclusion. He tells you to wait for him in his kitchen because his security system will trigger, but when you show up to his place, nobody's there yet, so you just complete the task and then leave. Were I in charge, I think it would have been clever for this to lead to a Far Cry 4 style secret ending, where if you just wait in the kitchen for 20 minutes without heading into his living room, you know, they'd stumble through the door and then just over the credits.
LXD, the Omar have need of your... Oh, Jesus Christ. You know we have a biomod for that which features non-piezo chem functionality. Plus it's ribbed.
Another way Invisible War expands on an idea from the first game is by adding two pilots instead of one. This time around, you can also find a younger, more brash, and British pilot named Sid Black in the shithole that is the Greasel Pit. He offers his paid services if you simply free his jet, which is impounded by a crime lord named Sophia Sack. So Alex can either enter Sack's compound and wipe out her and her gang, or if you've got the money, you can simply pay his debts. In that same bar, however, you'll be contacted via hologram by another pilot named Ava Johnson, whose helicopter is locked up in a WTO hangar. She gives little detail about what her deal is, but offers to fly you anywhere for free, and this leads down its own little collection of plot points. But the point is, while it sounds like a shallow way of improving Deus Ex, adding 2 pilots instead of 1, they also somewhat cleverly integrate positives and negatives for each. Freeing Sid's jet, even though it requires violence, is pretty much seen as a net good for most factions, and while you do have to pay for Sid's services, he does drop you closer to your objective, usually in some kind of illogical spot at the entrance of the place you have to infiltrate. Freeing Ava means disappointing the WTO, and while her services are free, and she'll even chime in every now and then with mission advice, she drops you further from your objective, so you gotta hoof it through more ventilation shafts and robot spiders. You're gonna be sweating and farting. No room for all the snackies you brought just in case.
Sweating my ass off.
They're putting nanobots in our soy food, in our sodas. I went to take a bite of soy food the other day, and I swear to Her Holiness, a goddamn Optimus Prime jumped out at me.
Sid's easy, he just wants money and booze, but Ava speaks in this strange monotone way and refuses to open up. And it's clear, yeah, something's going on. You got a thing that's like probably a bigger thing, you know? I think it's an interesting change that you're not the only nanotech augmented cyber freak in the game this time. There's at least 3 others out there that all just kind of scattered and wound up finding a place on every side of the board. Billy was clearly compromised early on by the Order. Leo can be found in the Greasel Pit looking for mercenary work with the Omar, and Clara was the only one who continued to follow instruction and reported to the WTO. Each of them become radicalized by their faction's cause, which stands in contrast to Alex's scant moments of exposition in the game's opening. Everyone in Tarsus comes from a wealthy, privileged background and was prepared for their training their whole lives, except for Alex, who grew up with adopted parents in old Chicago outside a WTO enclave. They don't really know why they were accepted by Tarsus or what they want out of it, other than it seemed exciting and lucrative. So while there are less RPG gameplay mechanics now, you do have a hand in pushing Alex to find their purpose in this tangled conflict. Though if this was truly an RPG, I'd find whatever this lady was taking and become a street goblin.
Something wrong?
Demons, catch me!
Sorry, never mind.
Look, you've had time to play this game, okay? It's been 20 years. And what? That's my fault? I gotta take time out of my day to deal with your inaction? That's bullshit. What? Oh no, I didn't hear about that. Look, I'm sorry for your loss. That was my bad. I just figured you sucked and were a fake gamer and I hate your ass. But all that is invalidated because you're sad right now. So, I tell you what, if you want to avoid spoilers and experience this game's story on your own without some fucking guy telling you about it, then skibidi to this toilet.
How are those little nanomachine guys working out for you? You feeling that shit yet?
Oh, best decision I ever made. I can't even tell you how... Oh, hang on.
What's happening?
Sorry, I have a biomod that allows me to hear the episode of How I Met Your Mother that my neighbors are watching.
That doesn't sound like a very good ability. I'm gonna be honest, that kinda sucks.
It's terrible. It's really awful.
Why do you do this to yourself?
I don't know how to change the setting. After breaking into Layla Nassif's office, Billy contacts you and argues with Alex about the order, thinking you should be grateful for being woken up, despite the miscommunication that led to them trying to murder you. She wanted you to see proof of Nassif's corruption, and what you do find raises some interesting questions. A note left in her apartment refers to some kind of smuggling ring involving Seattle's Ministry of Culture. Breaking into his home, you find a complimentary note about a trade going down. Layla and Tarsus were running equipment to a weapons manufacturer named Mako Ballistics, who are apparently fulfilling an order for the Knights Templar to create a new cutting-edge weapon called a mag rail. It's not a train, it is a gun. I realize that name sounds like it could be a train, but it is not a train, it's a gun. And guns are different from trains, so I suppose one could make a comparison that a train and a gun are similar, but that is not something I will be doing on this day today. If you decide to meet with Her Holiness, his hologram, you learn about something that is also potentially problematic, but maybe in a way that doesn't entirely concern Billy. Her Holiness says the church condemned the illegal biomodification experiments conducted on the Tarsus trainees. Alex, unsure what that implies given that everyone knew what they'd be signing up for, is sort of contentious during this exchange. This is also a bit of follow-through from the last game. In Deus Ex, mechanical augmentation, meaning literally removing bits of your body and replacing them with robotic parts, was starting to be phased out, replaced by nanotech augmentation. The problem in that game was that most people who were given nanotech augments would die as little computers ate away at their genetic code. Thus, JC and Paul Denton were cooked up in a lab as a workaround to this issue. In Invisible War, a corporation called Piezochem has advanced nanotech augmentation to the point where 1 in 20 people are compatible. So if you luck out genetically and are super wealthy, you can be JC Denton. The Order figured out that what Tarsus was doing was taking people who would have been ineligible for nanotech augmentation and rewriting their DNA to allow for it. The Order feared that a world where anyone who wanted could fork over the money to acquire these, where all skill and ability were pay-to-play modules, would disrupt the order of humanity.
You think there's a political agenda behind my biomods?
Yeah, Lin Mei Chen is still unable to fully answer why the raid on Tarsus felt more like an assault than a liberation, but the guy leading it, named Captain Lamar, has been off the grid since then, and seen associating with the Templars, even staging a prison break for one of their leaders. Many Order members have been drawn to join their ranks, especially in poor neighborhoods, as they are quickly given power, purpose, and a scapegoat in the world's augmented population. You can eavesdrop on a meeting between Lamar and a Templar representative, and it's clear that he's completely changed Kool-Aid flavor and is devoted to their cause, attempting to kill you just for being modified. A note left behind, firmly dropping a new question on the table. It mentions the deal between Mako and the Templars for the mag rail, which was put in jeopardy when Layla Nassif began communicating with Mako's biolab director, but curiously, the note refers to Nassif as an Apostle Corp scientist. The Order doesn't know much about Apostle Corp other than it seems that Layla Nassif and the scientists that made Alex's biomods were part of this group and they have connections with Mako, which the Templars feel threatened by. Chen wants you to go into Mako with the hope that Nassif is hiding out there. They also want you to kill the scientist responsible for the creation of the mag rail weapon. If you speak to Donna Morgan, the chief of operations at WTO, she is similarly concerned about the effects of biomods being widely available, but she's not as worried about the ramifications on the human race so much as the disruption of the biomod market. In a line that you'd think would carry more emotional weight, Alex observes, sort of robotically, that the WTO wants modified people to hold their value like real estate, which gets a sort of lukewarm, yeah, I guess you could say that. They also want you to investigate Mako ballistics, but with the thinly veiled primary objective of stealing the schematic for the mag rail. It's a lot like the plotline in the original Deus Ex where you break into VersaLife to steal the Dragon Tooth Sword, to either arm both sides of the Chinese Triad gangs or leave the door open for one side to have it and gain the upper hand. I'm not saying the writing is derivative. I'm just saying there's like 5 things you can write about, really. 1. Revenge. 2. Cool weapon. 3. Abuse allegory. 4. Sexy revenge. And 5. A really big boat that could also be a spaceship. The scientists at the biolab in Mako deny knowing anything about the whereabouts of Nassif, and the project director there claims that Apostle Corp is not in the weapons business, so they are just as confused why Mako would be shipping 500,000 experimental guns to the Templars. He theorizes that they were responsible for the destruction of Chicago, just to be absolutely certain that the Apostle Corp lab there was destroyed, but refuses to go into further detail. Ultimately, the big takeaway from your mission into Mako is that Nassif left a message for the project director here that she's going to be in Cairo, Egypt, making the whole business with the mag rail sort of irrelevant. I replayed this mission to see if this had some kind of noticeable effect on anything, but either way, the Templars get armed with mag rails because they had a plant inside Mako, so steal the schematic or kill its creator, and all that really does is score you points with one of the factions. Not that there are points, or your allegiance is measured in some way, but in a narrative sense, you supported the faction you felt was in the right, to no discernible difference. Which is kind of lame on its face, but also wholly appropriate maybe on accident. I mean, maybe you'll see the further into the game you get. I admit this is me giving the most charitable interpretation. I think it's dumb, but it was maybe supposed to be dumb, thus making it smart. If you've freed Ava and been using her as a pilot, she'll talk about her unusual mission. She's essentially wandering the planet, city to city, looking for her passenger. She hasn't checked Cairo, so she figures why not take you there. Like Seattle, the city is split by a substantial wealth disparity, and if the impoverished didn't have enough to worry about, Old Cairo is infested with greasels and plagued by regularly occurring nanite swarms, a man-made biblical plague believed to be the result of pre-collapse nanotech experiments. It ravages the slums, forcing its inhabitants to bolt their doors and wear respirators. The Order thinks this plague persists due to the indifference of the WTO. They have the resources to clean the air, but simply don't give a shit about Old Cairo. One of many side quests you can involve yourself in has you helping a little girl, sick with the plague, escape the slums by hacking the admissions list at the Tarsus School for Girls. Once she's a student, she'll be able to safely live in the Arcology Enclave dorm rooms, breathing filtered air. In the Order Mosque, we can meet back up with Billy, who's engaged in a debate with a man named Luminon Saman from the German chapter of the Order. Clearly, there is still a lot of infighting and disagreement about how the Order should operate. You can get a tip on how to cure the nanite swarm from Leo and the Omar, but the Order isn't really in the business of saving the world. The WTO Enclave here is extra secretive, even turning away a tax auditor there to determine what they even use their terminals for. They also allow a Templar recruitment kiosk to operate there, despite other places labeling them a hate group that should be reported to the local authorities.
If the human body is a sacred book, then no organization has burned more scripture than the Templars. Stop the hate. Report all Templar activity before it's too late for your community.
You can try to own them in the marketplace of ideas, but these guys are far too gone in their own zealotry and debate bro their way out of the conversation. Yeah, whatever, man. Straw man, ad hominem, moving the goalpost.
Bully, I'm ready for you.
Doing this breaks a quest where you need to eavesdrop on these guys to learn about a raid on the Omar, so I would wait to do that first, but I understand the urge to kill. Sneaking into the terminals, we find correspondence between the Arcology chairman and the Templars that seem to imply that the nanite plague was intentionally used as a false flag pinned on Apostle Corp, but thankfully, and stupidly, they also add, by the way, if you could not let anyone know there's a cure, that would be cool and great.
That's easy for an outsider to say. If I don't weigh the consequences, the city might get sued, or I could lose my job.
This is the same guy that appears on a welcoming hologram at the Arcology's entrance.
You enjoy a higher standard of living than anyone else in the world. Know this, such prosperity is not a product of corruption, and I am injured by the accusations against my office in...
Huh. So it was weird that you'd say that. I wasn't really thinking about it, but I sure am thinking about that now. I didn't have to go through with curing the plague, but I tend to play these games as an unshakable paragon of virtue.
Something breaks. I'm gonna have them dust that keyboard for fingerprints. I told them they should lock this place down. Something breaks. I'm gonna have them dust that keyboard.
At the Apostle Corp facility, for the first time the goals of the WTO and Order clash pretty strongly. The WTO wants Layla Nassif taken alive for questioning, seeing the Order's goal of killing her as vigilantism. They even send in Clara Sparks to ensure that this happens. This is, for me, the point in the game where I really started to get frustrated by the talking heads of the factions. The thing is, you could play this game completely buying into one ideology, but odds are you're gonna just do what you want to do at any given moment, and that means getting yelled at by somebody. In this pivotal moment where you either kill the person that turned you into a lab rat and hired a squad of nerds to watch you shower, or hand her over to the systemically cruel world police to do who knows what with, maybe never getting a straight answer of your own, I hit a wall where neither side seemed to be getting enough right to warrant pledging my servitude to, but I do think this was set up for the developments to come. Nassif is holed up in a lab as the facility is raided by the Knights Templar. As her house of cards comes tumbling down, she decides to get you back on her side by dispensing with the mystery, and she says, well, by now you've surely figured out that you're the third prototype made by Majestic 12. You're a clone of JC Denton. I mean, I knew that because I played the last game, and like, who else would you be? I think back, there's a person in the tube, their name is Alex, so I know that, but I don't think I actually knew that within the context of this game. Like, what was telling me that? Did I miss something? I'd imagine there were a lot of new players brought on board with this franchise's jump to console, and I can't imagine they saw this revelation coming or understood its significance all that well. The follow-up dialogue attempts to provide exposition, but it's sort of clumsy. Alex was born in Area 51, and then handed over to foster parents in Chicago, to be monitored by Apostle Corp. Over the years, different sects of this faction splintered and didn't remain in communication with each other. So Nassif, despite being in league with Apostle Corp, no longer knows their ultimate mission and doesn't know the whereabouts of the Dentons. But she did observe the Templars removing a frozen body from this facility. This base is compromised, but there is still one more to check in Trier, Germany, led by Tracer Tong, one of few characters old enough to be present in every era of Deus Ex, making him canonically a Zoomer. He was an important figure in the first game, advising JC in his dealing with the Illuminati and playing a big part in the events leading to the collapse. A sort of anti-government, anti-corporation advisor that stood as the inverse of that game's main antagonist, Bob Page. If you continue to press Nassif for details as part of the WTO's interrogation, she'll reveal that she believes there to be a teleporter in the Apostle Corps facility in Trier. A teleporter that would take you to a sanctuary of sorts, built by JC. Even if you kill Clara, Chen laments that the balance of the world is already fucked, because now the WTO won't rest until they have a monopoly on teleportation technology. So because this situation was too stressful to deal with, I just killed both of them. Fuck it! Now nobody knows anything.
It feels like I'm stumbling in the dark. No traces of blood, no clues.
Even though I played through the game twice, I found myself being unable to resist the allure of playing both sides so that I always came out on top, keeping both the Order and WTO mildly displeased with me, so that as soon as a third option reared its head, I'd screw them both over. I know this is a rule of thumb burned into the brains of elder RPGers, but you should remember to double check if you've exhausted all dialogue with certain characters. The first time I played this, I only had the one conversation with Layla, and Clara says, "Good work." So I figured I was done. But you can talk to her a few more times and she continues to explain that after the collapse, the Dentons went into hiding to formulate a new kind of government through biomodification. A cyber egalitarian society where you can't pay to win, where everyone is granted health, education, and self-reliance, and is in complete psychological sync with their neighbors, a utopia that Apostle Corp was built to usher in. This plan would have been shared with Alex eventually if the world's quasi-feudal power hadn't stumbled into this vast conspiracy and caught the faintest whiff of something to exploit for their gain. I think the writing around this concept is interesting and must have been difficult. In my opinion, despite being the idea of a human AI homunculus, this sounds more reasonable compared to the Order's unification through contradicting faith, which is already shown to not be working, as its members trickle off to the Templars and other splinter sects. Sounds more interesting than the WTO's Capitalism 2.0, or the Templars' intolerance and technophobia. And in comparison, Apostle Corp is so undeniably tied into what is clearly the main plot of the game, and on some level it only feels right to pursue the faction that feels the most significant to the plot. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, so that's the end game. Like, I already made the decision at the end of Deus Ex, and then Invisible War has served as this 16-hour, are you sure you want to proceed prompt? On some level, I think they must have recognized that siding with the protagonist of the last game would simply be too much of a no-brainer. We presumably know him more than any of these other jokers anyway. I think to mitigate this sum, they really hone in on the issue of privacy. At two separate points in the game, while speaking to an AI construct character, the issue of privacy and surveillance comes up.
Let's talk again.
You're starting to seem more like a surveillance tool than a pop star.
My conversation style adapts to the user. Besides, people tell me things. The data must be handled responsibly.
Both NG and Ava have no concept of why privacy is important, and really, why would an AI care about such a human thing? It's not like they feel shame, embarrassment, or fear. It just makes cold, logical sense to them that keeping secrets led to calamity, such as the collapse.
I don't like being spied on.
Your notions of privacy are old-fashioned. It was a love of privacy that brought on the collapse. A love of secrets, plans, and personal possessions.
I still don't like being spied on.
In Deus Ex, we watched a bunch of rich, intelligent weirdos in secret clandestine societies destroy the world as they were forced from the shadows. But it is a compelling case. If all humanity was linked into a techno-hive mind where everyone knew everything about everyone, does that remove some fundamental humanity from us?
Perhaps I'm too aggressive, but a society in which everyone understands everyone else is something I think we all should strive for.
It's extra funny coming from NG, who is just an advertisement essentially, but if you give her some middle-of-the-road centrist WTO take about there needing to be a strong organization to society, she casually escalates it to, yeah, we'd really be organized if we were all made to think and act alike.
We need a common set of laws and one police force.
More than that, if you ask me. People have to think alike before they can act alike.
You know, on second thought, Invisible War also predicted that there would be a billionaire pop star that created an AI of herself, leading to comically absurd scenarios. When Alex arrives in Trier, Germany, a lot has developed. A lockdown and curfew has been implemented following some unrest that has begun to swell. A shard of the Order has been repeatedly attacking a robot manufacturing company called Panzerworks, and what started as acts of mischief escalated to sabotage and then violence. In response, the unthinkable has happened and a summit is being conducted between Her Holiness and Chairman Dumier of the WTO. For the first time, an attempt will be made to form some kind of alliance between the historically antagonistic groups. As nice as peace talks sound, speaking with the local Order seekers gives the impression that even if a truce was called, the Order is no longer as unified as it once was. Luminon Samon, the guy you might have seen arguing with Billy back in Cairo, has been gathering followers, growing a splinter faction using a more traditional interpretation of Her Holiness's teachings. Basically, the very idea that they'd be holding a summit with their sworn enemy shows that Her Holiness has gone woke. At the Nine Worlds Tavern, we find Tracer Tong, who confirms that Alex D is Alex Denton, a cloned descendant of J.C. Denton. The nearby Apostle Corp lab has a portal he constructed that only those with his bloodline can use. That will take him to his sanctuary in Antarctica. but we're also hours behind the Templars, meaning one of the Tarsus trainees has been assisting the Templars all along and intends to kill JC and Paul Denton. Whoever has been assisting them has apparently also kidnapped Her Holiness and is holding her at the same lab. Tong seems to have the same idea I had because we're both geniuses and old and have fucked up faces. He wants the summit to take place because the Order and WTO will be useful in keeping the Templars at bay, while Apostle Corp completes its mission. I like this meeting because it's starting to feel so official that this plot will link back around to the plot of the first game. We're getting familiar characters and everything, but it also draws attention to one of those tiny bits of plot minutia that I can't stop myself from putting under a microscope, which is like, so did Alex just live his 20 years of life as Alex D? Like his foster parents called him Alex D? They didn't give them their name? Or they all took on the last name D?
Name's Alex G.
D for Upper Seattle Dandy.
D for D's Nut.
But I think this next scene throws down debatably the most clever card they had. It's some of the clearest political and social commentary present in the game. After fighting through some Templars to get into the Apostle Corp lab, Alex finds Her Holiness and Donna Morgan of the WTO imprisoned in a cage for transgenics. Feeling that the jig is up, Her Holiness reveals herself to be Nicolette Duclair, the heir to an Illuminati fortune when her mother died, born with a platinum spoon in her mouth. In Deus Ex, she didn't agree with the Illuminati's aspirations for world domination and funded the resistance groups Silhouette and Chad Dumier. How then did it come to pass that she'd become some kind of spiritual leader for the Order and Chad, her friend and lover, would become the chairman of the WTO, ending up on two sides of a long-standing battle? It's because they were two hands belonging to one. The Illuminati. That's right, the leader of the WTO and the Order are allied, and worse, fucking. After the collapse, Nicolette and Chad would take advantage of society's division and play on that, forming two separate and opposing ideologies and slowly squishing them together into one orb. A globe, if you will, an Earth-like globe. If you could just please. Together they would attempt some kind of ethical Illuminati, a non-problematic way of achieving complete dominance over all the world's power. The only reason they came up with the idea for the summit was to encourage their enemies, the Templars, to make a move and reveal their leadership. And it worked. They learned that Luminon Samon is really a Templar recruiter. He's been whispering in the ear of Order Seekers and has been arming them for a planned insurrection they are acting on now by kidnapping her and disabling the teleporter to JC. He's taken a vital MacGuffin, a vital sequencing module from it and is keeping it at a mosque in Raustadt. On its own, the reveal that the Illuminati is back and these two characters who once raged against the machine have themselves become the machine isn't all that earth-shattering. The Illuminati was a big part of the last game, so I would assume they'd show up again. And why would this spiritual leader just happen to be noticeably French when there was already two established French characters? What, are you gonna have 3 French characters? There are laws against that sort of thing. I will say though, they do lay the groundwork for this overarching theme of choice, or rather the illusion of it. For the majority of the game so far, you've had one of 2 clearly opposing voices whispering in your ear, and coming to learn that they both answer to the same master, whether they knew it or not, is thought-provoking. I think now more than ever, people feel the weight of being presented 2 options that seem indistinguishably dreadful. I like that we then see how several of the characters deal with this information. Some, like Donna, are emboldened, finding renewed purpose and understanding the importance of maintaining this masquerade. I'm in on the secret. I'm special. Others, like Clara, are unsure what to think, realizing they never really closely examined whose hands they placed their faith and life into. At this point in the game, she's essentially Chad's protege, his contingency plan in case Alex doesn't follow through with World Domination Plot 2.0. But she was clearly an Enclave baby through and through, seeing the world in black and white despite being hired by Team Grey. And some, like Lynn, are utterly lost. The knowledge that her life's purpose was built on a lie is too much to bear. The sacred texts, just a well-written psychological tool. She's been such a girl boss the whole game, I had to quick load and hide the truth from her because it was just too much to bear. She deserves to be thriving, in her lane. moisturized. Something I completely missed on my first playthrough was that if you dispel her faith, she says,
"My parents were Max Chen and Maggie Chow, co-conspirators involved with MJ-12.
I literally spat out Zero Sugar White Monster because it sells out less frequently. Maggie Chow and the head of the Red Arrow Triad hooked up? Scandal! It's really such a pointless connection to the first game, like it means next to nothing. Other than I guess it's tragic that her life was also disrupted by a network of lies. I probably shouldn't tell her that I'm actively working to aid the guy that killed her mother and threw her out a window, as that is my canon. On second thought, one of the deleted plot threads from Deus Ex was that Maggie was posing as Paul Denton's wife, but was really an MJ-12 spy, so she was this close to coming out a Denton. Then she would have the DNA needed to use JC's teleporter, and she could show up at the last minute, jilted by the order being a lie, with a bomb strapped to her. Yeah, you know what? I forgot what year this came out. I've avoided talking about it until now, but Invisible War has this other plotline running parallel with all this, jet setting around the world looking for mad scientists and mercenary work that begins kind of silly. Every hub area in the game has a coffee shop that is one of two brands, Queequegs, the more humble, ethically sourced, environmentally conscious company, or Pequods, the top shelf, most decadent coffee that science has produced. It's so advanced it even whitens your teeth. Both companies are named after references to the book Moby Dick, just as Starbucks is, and I can imagine this idea was written when Starbucks was experiencing its meteoric rise to ubiquity, so it was kind of a topical joke to make a plotline about coffee shops springing up on every corner with more or less the same quality product. That is to say, a quality I would describe as bad publicly, but privately.
Oh, it's delicious! I like it, actually! Yes, this is how I talk.
It's funny you say that, Jennifer, because coffee figures prominently into our tale of woe.
Nearly every one of these coffee shops offers you a job, and that job is always an attack on the other coffee chain. This involves acts of sabotage and even murder. Actually, I don't remember. I may have just done some murders because I'm quirky like that. You can burn the other's supply of coffee beans, tamper with zoning paperwork so one can open a new franchise, or bribe NG Resonance's manager to have her advertise one over the other. The coffee war is in perfect lockstep with the Invisible War, even the way they are separated by class. WTO headquarters are always seated within enclaves for the wealthy and accommodated with Pequod's coffee. The Order's mosques are always placed in impoverished areas outside of the enclaves alongside Queequeg's storefronts and kiosks. Some of them are just like wooden desks with a coffee maker. And just as you uncover that the WTO and Order are under the wing of the Illuminati, we accidentally uncover that Queequegs and Pequods, despite their rivalry, are both owned by the same shell company. In all avenues of life, we pick a side in a manufactured competition while a ghoulish hegemonic power laughs maniacally overhead.
I guess you're not very political.
I have too many good things happening for me at Queequegs to chain myself to some political movement. My only enemy is Pequods, and our battlefield is the customer.
If you want, you can tell this guy that the two brands belong to the same entity and even encourage him to go public with that information, which results in him being assassinated by the Pequod Tactical Air Assault Team. Back in the Apostle Corp facility and reeling from all these revelations, Alex can talk to a transgenic Grey in the next tube over, and he asks if you're another JC gone bad, referring to Billy Adams. She interrogated him about the portal to JC and has already gone through.
We were a VersaLife experiment, and JC came and helped us.
Oh, guess that's what he did, canonically. Before heading out to retrieve the missing part of the teleporter, Tracer Tong warns you that if the Illuminati have control of Apostle Corp technology, then they'll be unstoppable. They'll handpick a ruling elite and focus on one thing: centralization of wealth via the WTO, ideology through the Order, and power with all the nanotech toys Apostle Corp cooked up. I kinda like this scene because it's maybe the one thing he says where he's not being an info dump fan service character. He pleads with you to protect JC from Billy and the Templars. What's coming could lead to another Dark Age, and he's had time to acknowledge that the first one was in large part his bad. In a complete 180, he calls JC the only sincere leader humanity has ever had. After JC's mind melded with the Helios AI, he slowly entered a sort of catatonic state, and while powerful, he's deactivated more or less, like he ran out of batteries. Tong wants Alex to reactivate JC by sharing the architecture of their biomods with him, like a firmware update. This is something they attempted to do with Paul Denton, JC's brother, but failed because they hadn't perfected the process. After the failure nearly killed Paul, they had him cryogenically frozen until they could figure out how to stop him from dying. Which is sort of interesting considering Paul was a variable in the first game. He could have, and for most people's playthrough I'd wager, died. One of few blemishes on the original Deus Ex is the disappearance of Paul, alive or dead, from the second half of the game. So I guess it's only fitting that he appears only in the second half of this game. They do a similar, I'd say more effective thing in this game with Clara. If you don't kill her, there's a sequence of events that could lead her to being killed off screen by a gang of Templar thugs, making Saman look more like a monster. But if she makes it past the next hub, Chad orders her to kill JC Denton. When she refuses to murder a comatose goth, she's imprisoned and held at gunpoint to force Alex to do it instead.
By the way, Miss Clara Sparks is now dead.
If you want, you can rescue her from WTO custody.
I was bluffing, Alex. You didn't need to go to so much trouble. What kind of person do you think I am?
Whereupon she expresses that she doesn't want to be anyone's killing machine and just wants to go home. It's probably not as deep as I'm making it out to be, but I can see the power in this character whose vision of the world was shattered, and rather than pick a new side, they just remove themselves from the field. It reminded me of the first time Lin May talks to Alex back at the Tarsus Academy. Alex says they weren't forced into the Covert Ops program, to which Lin May responds, "That's because you never tried to leave," implying that they didn't know they signed away their ability to make choices. Through the repaired portal to Antarctica, a group of Greys have been looking after JC's habitat while he slept, waiting for Paul to arrive with the key, only for Billy, an army of Templars, and now Alex to appear instead. The Greys are here because the whole base used to be a VersaLife facility. JC agreed to protect them if they kept his machinery operational. Everyone is going to be talking your ear off in this hub, especially Billy, who attempts to get Alex to see that killing JC Denton is the safest path forward because his power is too unpredictable, and both the Illuminati and Apostle Corp have their own designs for that power. Also, before she hangs up on you, or like whatever the hologram equivalent of snapping close the clamshell phone is, she ends this conversation by saying that you won't be able to stop her from repurposing the Helios AI, which is, like, hang on, I thought you said you're destroying this power. Destroy and repurpose are two hugely different concepts, but something tells me the Templar pilled types aren't the type of people that would respond to being called out for hypocrisy, so what can you do? Thanks to that dent in DNA, Alex can enter JC's sanctuary. Inside, Ava Johnson speaks to you, still as a hologram, and even though it's probably obvious by now, confirms that she's an AI construct created by Tracer Tong. At the end of the first game, when Area 51 was destroyed, she was tasked with finding JC in the chaos. Tracer Tong wants you to repair the Helios modules on his life support system using an infusion of their biomod architecture. At this juncture, I don't really understand how this process happens, so thankfully the way it's depicted is sort of abstract. As the Helios modules are repaired, you're shown little snapshots of JC's memories, walking through recreations of locations in the first game, starting with Maggie Chow's penthouse apartment.
This room is from Hong Kong, where JC Denton went into hiding for a while. Talk about ego. Is this what you want to bring about?
I mean, yeah, kinda. There's Joseph Manderley's office, which looks shockingly barren with the visual upgrade. In the virtual memory of the Area 51 lab in which Alex and JC were born, Billy appears with a cadre of robot spiders, unaware that I too have mastered your spider arts.
Now you've really upset me. It will take more than that.
Oh shit, the spiders do nothing.
When the Helios modules are repaired, we have a long talk with a now lucid JC. Now that Apostle Corp has perfected the biomod procedure in Alex and the other trainees, he can move forward with his plan to transform the human race. He explains that after he defeated Majestic 12, he realized the answer to definitively stopping tyranny was too complex for his small bean brain, so he merged with Helios, and together they could determine the best way to evolve beyond these cyclical power struggles. He's going to establish a new civilization by biomodding everyone, everywhere. I don't know where this energy came from. The Western world has created a tangle of agencies and arcane procedures to keep humanity in check. In JC's utopia, he wouldn't bother trying to untangle that junk drawer of cables. He'd just fix human nature. In this world, nobody would be born into poverty, while the person born one room over is given a life of wealth and nanotech improvements. The game predicts a question you may have in the middle of this conversation, and Alex asks essentially how this plan differs from what the Omar want, some kind of assimilated cyborg hive mind. The difference is that Helios would be moderating this mind-melded democracy. It would be a two-way conversation with a leader and not just connecting yourself to become Legion. For the sake of avoiding spoilers outside of the spoiler zone, there is something really amusing about witnessing a conversation between Alex and JC. Because, and this is no shade to Invisible War's voice cast, they are sort of putting in the same performance, which is a little bit robotic on purpose. All the test tube baby characters in this game speak in this quirked up, monotone, measured way, and JC is like the blueprint of that style. So it's like watching two different actors acting out a scene while auditioning for the role of the same character. They're having a bit of a talking like this contest.
I'm going to establish the first post-human civilization, and you're my first citizen. Welcome.
A new civilization? That's a pretty tall order. What do you need from me?
I need you to return to Cairo to rescue my brother Paul, who was seized by the Templars. Then meet me at Liberty Island, where in the ruins of an old military base there is an Aquinas node that can be used to distribute the infusion technology worldwide.
Okay.
In my opinion, as a true ending to the story established in Deus Ex, Invisible War is conceptually inoffensive. It's not doing enough to radically alter the first game, good or bad, but I will admit that the setup to the ultimate showdown, so to speak, is a bit flimsy. I think maybe they were aiming for like a Guy Ritchie movie, everybody meets up in the same place at the end of the movie thing, but it kind of comes across more like the Hobbit trilogy, they all come together at the end kind of thing. 95% of the time, the major characters are talking to you over your info link from disparate parts of the planet, and even though the Tarsus trainees are essentially their proxies in this conflict, the faction leaders all decide to show up in person to New York, which is where you're headed, after rescuing or killing Paul back in Cairo. Even Tracer Tong shows up, like, I'm sorry man, God love you, but why is this 65-year-old lab geek on the front line, laser gun in hand? You could have contributed to this fight from the safety of that German bar's back room, just fucking pull a Thomas Jane and Money Plane.
Sucks to be you, pal.
Before leaving, Samon confirms that it was his call that led to Chicago being destroyed, and that he did it out of desperation, hoping to destroy Alex and Apostle Corp in one fell swoop. He says a bunch of other shit that sounds like muffled trumpet noises after this reveal. I think he might have attempted some kind of appeal to emotion, but let's be real. The Templars are assholes with no redeeming qualities. The fashy looking outfits, the overemphasis on words like purity, everything about them screams the baddies. Right after this, you can find a Templar that locked himself in a cell because a transgenic was chasing him. You can see him trying to code switch his cyborg racism long enough to get you to help him out, so I decided to open the gate, but let nature's beautiful cycle continue.
Now is not the time for conversation.
The Illuminati wants you to kill Paul and return biomod technology to international regulation. They even send along a brainwashed cyborg Illuminati trooper to ensure that you do as you're told and maintain the status quo. I suppose one could read deeper into the fact that the Illuminati's other foot soldiers are soulless boot boys with unwavering no-eyed trust in the plan, but I am distracted by this fit though. Sheesh. Samon wants you to kill Paul and allow his scientists to scan your cell structure just Yeah, so they know more about the thing they definitely don't plan on replicating. In an interesting turn, Nicolette attempts to dissuade you from helping JC Denton by illustrating what a world with forced biomodification might look like, directing you to find Leo one last time. He's nearly completed his transition to Omar, which at first sounded like what he wanted. His whole thing was that he wanted to be the best mercenary that ever lived. But now the Omar, his employers, are pressuring him to get the procedure, the one that would irreversibly link his mind to the rest of the Omar. Thing is, now that the choice he had in the matter seemed to be fading, he's having second thoughts and is thinking of just bailing and going into hiding. If you want, you can tell him to man up and become machine, or you can give him some money to hire a pilot. If you do the latter, he'll show up in the game's final act to help you out. And while I do see the parallel with JC's goal, I think there is a stark difference between Alex's biomods and the Omar's biomods. Alex is just like a regular person with purple eyes. The Omar are survivalist cyber weirdos with strict rules, and they sew you into frog suits and physically implant a fucking antenna into your cerebral cortex. It sounds a bit more invasive than you drinking Mountain Dew with microscopic battle bots in it. Or maybe they were like battle beasts? Those little animal guys with hologram stickers on their chest that always fell off because I took them in the bath to carry on their warfare at sea? So maybe it was like that, I don't fucking know. If we revive Paul, he leaves for New York, where JC has constructed a device that will populate the air with nanotech particles. Kind of like how the plague spread here, but in theory, instead of a plague, it would spread knowledge. Before his machine could be activated, Alex has to head into the ruins of the UNATCO building, where this whole story started 20 years ago. Down in the basement, there is an MJ12 Aquinas router, which is like a really good router that we need on. There's something so odd and uncanny about Liberty Island. It's received such a particular lick of paint that its memory fades in and out of lucidity. In the 20 years since our last visit, the destroyed Statue of Liberty has been replaced by an indestructible hologram. I mean, I guess you could unplug it, but that would hardly require some kind of terrorist false flag to accomplish. You could just dress up like a janitor and kick the cord. I was so caught up in squinting at the vaguely familiar location that I barely even noticed I had initiated a fight with Luminon Salmon and killed him. I thought he was just some guy. I was literally like, whoa, I remember this little tunnel. This is where that broken electrical box was sparking. Oh shit. Is that like the main antagonist of this game? I didn't see you there, big dog. Deus Ex was a game built from conspiracy theory, presuming every single one of those funny little ideas we had in the 90s were valid. It really made a meal of all this fertile lore, shoveling healthy handfuls of black helicopters, alien greys, and plandemics into a context where that made sense. Invisible War doesn't entirely follow this same ethos. It doesn't return to that same pile and pick out new funny ideas to add to the red string conspiracy board. It seems really complacent with the pieces it already has and following through with the canon they kicked off the franchise with. I think that was kind of a missed opportunity and why this game doesn't feel nearly as prophetic and wild as its predecessor. I would have loved to see some of the abandoned elements of the first game make a comeback, like a level set in the White House or in the network of tunnels beneath the Denver airport. Hell, even if they threw in a nod to chemtrails or flying rods, I'd be impressed. It's because of this drought of kooky ideas that I was so taken by a cute Easter egg for those who played the first game. In the original, you can walk in on your mechanically augmented coworkers, Gunther and Anna, talking about their own little conspiracy theory. Gunther theorizes that the guy who refills the soda machine in the break room is intentionally changing the orange soda to lemon lime just because he knows that Gunther likes orange, and it's probably some kind of cyborg hate crime. Of course, there is also the very real possibility that his fat, clunky robot fingers just smash into the other buttons and he never gets the flavor he wants.
So you think the staff has some kind of plot?
Yes, they do that on purpose.
In Invisible War, the old UNATCO headquarters is in ruins and now inhabited by squatters with no idea how significant their new home once was to the fate of the world. In the break room, our burning question is answered. A crate fog is cleared, socketing this vital puzzle piece into place. Two squatters have busted the machine open and emptied it of its 20-year-old contents to find that it was entirely stocked with lemon lime soda.
Probably some sort of office politics. Someone trying to get back at somebody else.
It probably seemed important at the time whose favorite got stocked.
Whatever pettiness it was, they're all gone now.
Somebody held a grudge against orange soda fans, which taps into a deeply personal issue of mine. Once the amusement of the scene wore off, I began to think about the console gamer that picked this game up from Game Crazy and popped it in with no context for this moment. What is UNATCO? What is an Aquinas router? Why are these squatters talking so much about lemon lime soda? Back in what used to be Alex Jacobson's office, a person you don't know if you didn't play the last game, and his name is not even spoken in this one, so I guess it doesn't matter. This Alex was kind of the original voice yammering in your ear about what you should and shouldn't be doing. Honestly, the way he covered for JC, you pray to have a friend like that.
That child is an NSF agent, JC. You gotta take him out. He may look small, but he's as sick and twisted as they come. What are you waiting for? End his tiny reign of terror. He's got a gun, probably. Take the shot. Do it, JC. Do it now, before it's too late. Yes! Murder!
You're greeted with something you hate to see. A screen with 3 options. Which faction do you want to win? A mechanically clear point of no return, triggering a 15-second or so video showing what the button did. This is one of those limitations that was less maligned, I'd say, then than it is now, in a time when games cost hundreds of millions of dollars and are produced by hundreds of beleaguered gamers. Button 1 gives complete power to the Illuminati, bringing about the Age of Light they envisioned, an advanced, peaceful society oblivious to its true ruler, a being known as Ophelia, likely made from a repurposed Helios, who oversees the Earth's heavily monitored cyber cities from an orbiting satellite. I think all the endings have an ominous air to them, a bit of a monkey's paw irony slipped in between any optimistic notes. But this is one of the more cold and concerning ones. The imagery is clearly focused on surveillance and opulence, with its classes divided into their ultimate extremes. Button 2 transfers power over to the Templars, who rid the world of biomodification, enacting their cruel religious purging and really making a show of it. As if the imagery wasn't grim enough, it's concluded by their leader announcing that in the absence of nanotechnology, the new enemy is human error, a vague and portentous threat of further ignorant violence. I don't know if it's just the aesthetic of the Templars or if they just did enough damage to devolve our timeline back into medieval Europe. This is probably the most realistic ending. Button 3 sees Alex merging with JC and Helios to create more or less a cyber god that releases a swarm of nanotechnology all over the world into every person and connects all of humanity into a single mind that immediately automates the economy. Peace is realized and humanity has reached its peak. It's actually a really hopeful and inspiring message right up until it says,
Helios has spoken.
Something about that sounds a little bit intimidating and not so much like just a unified brain chat room. It's giving the air of, we may have just made a moderation bot our god. Someone's gonna say the word Pakistan and then get fucking vaporized. I go back and forth on whether or not I like the game's twist. I mean, I know I like it, and I think it's a clever thing to say in a game. It's just kind of a limp reveal. It would be one thing if either the WTO or Order were likable enough to feel all in with one cause. Then you find out they're 2 flavors of the same thing and you've been manipulated. It would give you, the player, genuine trust issues. But they fucked up by introducing JC and Apostle Corp as an alternative because I gotta side with my boy JC. It's like being offered a red pill or a blue pill or a Totino's pizza roll. There is another ending you can unlock by simply killing all faction leaders since they were dumb enough to meet up on the same island. Doing so triggers another collapse, leading to centuries of war and power struggles until humanity hits rock bottom, devastating the earth and reducing the population to tribes of wandering gangs, in which the Omar thrive, having spent all their time hoarding tech to upgrade themselves for this exact scenario, where they would emerge from civilization's ashes like sleek, sexy cockroaches. All 4 options are bleak in their own way, with the Helios ending having the most wiggle room for positivity. I guess it's sort of an inversion of the original game's premise in that JC finds out UNATCO is an arm of his enemies, and in this one Alex doubts the intention of Apostle Corp, but they wind up having, I guess you could say, the purest intentions. Like, they don't really want financial gain or have some kind of lust for power. They just want a light rail in every city. Like, sure, we've abolished privacy and personality and surrendered control to an amorphous blob of robot, human, and half, which is scary. The frontier of man conquered. What do we do now? Like, go back to work? play video games? If one person played Starfield, we all played Starfield. Is that good? I don't know, but at least, you know, we're all on the same page about it.
Learn to count the number 666 and teach the method to your friends. Then inform as many people as you can. Family, friends, even your skeptical next-door neighbor. Help them increase their awareness of the Antichrist system.
Deus Ex Invisible War features a story that is not nearly as fun, as thoughtful, or creative as Deus Ex, but also isn't enough of an embarrassing failure to truly be upset about. Spending half of its time introducing a new setting to a new audience, and then likely alienating that same audience by making a hard pivot to being a direct sequel. How would you follow up what was immediately and still is considered to be one of the best video games ever made full stop with a question mark because it's still a question, and excluding this addendum? I do think what ideas it introduces and themes it plays with are still things that aren't often as plainly examined in the 20 years since. Watered down as it may be, it's still trying to work out a formula that forces you to make tough decisions about who you trust and what you believe, and unavoidably, in doing so, revealing a bit about the political leanings of those who constructed it, I think. Games often seem to walk on eggshells around the overtly political, and Invisible War tramples through a philosophically muddy gamified version, both sidesing every option, revealing an inescapable truth that everything's fucked and everything sucks, and you don't really know why, but you want to justify. Ripping someone's head off. Deus Ex wasn't based on one particular property, but a web of established conspiracy thinking. Invisible War exists in a post-apocalypse, where most of the elements of those conspiracies we know are now destroyed or reached their logical conclusion. In a way, it has to then work with what it's got, and what early 2000s talking points they could extrapolate, which at the time was consumed with things like terrorism, the Patriot Act, wealth disparity, legacy media dying. It's more reflective than it is ponderous. That goofy sense of whimsy behind its ideas, behind throwing out a conspiracy and playing it straight-faced, is sorely missed. It's very possible this was completely deliberate, because certainly some of the original game's dev team would come to dislike the turn conspiracy thinking would rapidly take in the fallout of 9/11. I shudder to think how the same concept could be utilized in a spiritual follow-up, seeing as though conspiracy thinking has literally just become enabling schizophrenia. JC would achieve Chim and realize he was in a simulation and become paranoid that the Illuminati was using Jewish space lasers and voice-to-skull technology to make him gay. But the theorists in this game are made to look more pathetic. They even satirize the aggressive conservative talk shows of the era with talk bullets.
Time again for a talk bullet.
Always on
in the bullseye today, Chairman Dumier of the WTO.
In which its hosts talk over their guests, ask loaded questions, and whinge about a faked Mars landing, encouraging harassment of the one surviving astronaut from this alleged event, mirroring a real-life event that would have happened during the game's development, in which a fake moon landing theorist lured astronaut Buzz Aldrin to a confrontation that ended with him being punched in the face.
Call the police. Solicit on like why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon? You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Bullets, indeed. You and your kind have murdered the human intellect with momentary impulses, the noise of the machines seeping into every mind.
Harvey Smith and Warren Spector both credit this shift in setting as being integral in the game's downfall.
It wasn't a bad story. It was more like we moved into the future, which really, we didn't realize at the time, but undermined a lot of what made Deus Ex great. A lot of what made Deus Ex great was the familiarity, the groundedness.
For all his meme potential, J.C. Denton was a likable character that exuded cool guy energy to the point of self-parody, which was in turn so loserly that it came off as endearing. Our new protagonist has more agency, more options available to them, but as a result doesn't seem like they have much of a strong opinion about anything. I mean, by design, they are fresh out of their training with an institution that doesn't really have an alliance, operating more like a mercenary trade school. They got no brains and thus no cool guy one-liners. Actually, there was one singular line that gave me a chuckle, and it's said by the Laura Bailey voiced Alex, and it was mostly because it was such a Blood Rain-coded line, said by Rain herself.
The smallest breeze carries you off nature's straight and narrow path, which is ever eroded by the human lust for transcendence.
I love it when you talk dirty.
In a way, Alex is just a kid that glides through every obstacle. At least that's what it looks like from the perspective of someone with a crippling inability to express things like guile, wit, or comfort around another human being.
Maybe I can settle things on Mr. Black's behalf.
You better not be feeding me a line.
You wouldn't fall for something like that.
I guess you're right. Through this door.
How the fuck did he do that? Am I able to turn off the part of my mind that knows how good Deus Ex is and enjoy Invisible War for what it is? It's become harder with age. As years go by and Deus Ex ages like a fine wine, while Invisible War struggles to subsist in a timeline so far beyond the pocket dimension that was required to birth it. But what does seem to increase is its oddity and novelty. There is still little else like it because it's of an era. I mean, more specifically, it's of a precise span of about 3 years. It's also pulling double duty by completing the already complete story of Deus Ex and trying to find its own voice, pulling out toys it doesn't have much time to play with. I would have loved to learn more about the SS... Oh, bad place to pause, bad place to pause. I would have loved to learn more about how the SSC came about, how difficult it must have been for a band of militant weirdos to become the world's de facto police force for hire. Fuck up. Would have loved to see how the Omar rose to prominence, glimpse behind the curtain of these secretive nomadic cyborg arms dealers, know how they piss and what they do with it, and how fucked up the thing they do with it is because I know they're doing something with it. In an intriguing but outlying bit of environmental storytelling, there's an area in the third act of the game set in what was once a VersaLife facility, an organization that is destroyed by the end of the last game, but in this one, we're dealing with the effects of all their experiments being left unattended. You can find mementos of the VersaLife scientists realizing the collapse had happened, attempting to survive, cut off from the rest of the world, and ultimately succumbing to the cold while also being hunted by the transgenics they cooked up. I'd love to see more of that. Corporations and institutions being bulldozed. I want to see mankind divided. I want to see the fall. I want to see humans begin a revolution. It reminds me that the first game was often described as being set 5 minutes before the fall of mankind, a pre-apocalypse, like humanity is just grimacing at the iceberg it doesn't have the willpower to steer away from. Invisible War takes place in a time that is comparatively comfortable. I mean, life is shitty, but it's been shitty for a long time and has noticeably improved since the collapse caused by JC. Entirely a matter of preference, but I think if we're committing to the collapse happening, I'd love to see the immediate fallout of the first game's events. A somewhat advanced, soft, futuristic society that's suddenly cut off from one another and dealing with the chaos of the infrastructure and economy crumbling, gangs commandeering military bots, Illuminati mansions raided. I want to see those kids actually storm Area 51 and see just how many they kill. Obviously, for this part, it's harder to explain my rose-tinted eye augment. Well, not really. I can freely admit I just like garbage. I like far worse games than this. You don't know how low I'll stoop. I get in there, man. I get into the grit, into the muck.
What a perfect day. Hey, you're here.
I can't point to any one of the steps to accessibility as the culprit for why Invisible War stumbles as hard as it does. Because honestly, in listening to their own words, they could sell me on just about any of the game's changes in a vacuum. Except for the removal of the grid inventory, there's no combination of words you could make that would ever make such a decision sound like more than monosyllabic grunts. But I could be made to understand universal ammo and making Alex less of a character and more of an avatar, while still understanding that this confluence of ideas did not create an ideal sequel to Deus Ex. It wasn't worded as just a way to make Deus Ex a console game. It sounded like they had genuine things they felt they had simply got wrong. And I mean, yeah, I guess I can find some things that needed tightening up, but like, I wouldn't have guessed any of this.
We had skills and augmentations that were overlapping and redundant, so we eliminated those. We boiled them all down into one system, which was easier on the console interface, it was easier to learn, but it didn't allow for certain combinations that even if they weren't mechanically interesting, they built a fantasy in the player's head.
An immersive sim is trying so many things at once, and it's never going to get them all right. There's almost a beauty to that. It's in the valiant attempt to reach a divinity that we can only glimpse momentarily. It's not all a hack job though. They made some actual decent improvements to stealth, biomods, and weapon mods, but these things are swallowed by some awkward choices and technical issues believed to arise from their heavily modified version of Unreal Engine, the programmer for which left mid-development. So on a base level, much like the first game, this is a first-person action-adventure game with an emphasis on player choice and emergent gameplay. That is, gameplay that wasn't planned by the game's developers. A philosophy that aims at allowing you to overcome obstacles in the game in creative ways that couldn't have been scripted.
Squib time!
Stay quiet.
It's set across a handful of hub areas where you can obtain and complete tasks for rewards. Some of these tasks are entirely dialogue-based, like bribing a pop star's manager to promote a coffee chain. Some of these require stealth and espionage, like breaking into a nightclub's basement to steal some compromising information. And of course, most of the main tasks will have you engaging in lethal or non-lethal combat with a number of warring factions, and there are plenty of shades in between. In the original Deus Ex, non-lethal combat was not so much a legitimate, enjoyable path through the game, so much as a masochistic way of cranking up the difficulty, flipping a switch from hard to step on my n***s. But like, it doesn't hurt so much as it is annoying mostly. Like, you didn't do it right? Do you know what I mean? Invisible War makes the bewildering choice of making a non-lethal run easier in many ways, yet still meaning just as little. In one case, you can knock a boss enemy unconscious and the only result is that they are still alive to come after you after their nap. I don't know why you'd want to do anything else but kill. Not just because I'm a fan of murder, but because why would I want to put further strain on the game's already delicate AI? Death is helping it process.
The landing pad is off.
What the fuck?
There's an almost tense balance at play, as though if I so much as look at someone the wrong way, suddenly people are walking into walls and drawing their weapon at their own shadow. It makes me feel like some kind of trickster demigod.
I'm gonna throw one.
With the limitations of a console game, the design philosophy was altered to present smaller areas, making wiser use of that space. I mean, it's a transparent justification for what they did to Deus Ex, but it's in its own way admirable. It sounds like a tough thing to pull off, and make old or new fans happy. And maybe? Hot take. I think they were close to doing that. There are few but still present rooms that are clearly designed with the same sense as Deus Ex, where it's clear they wanted you to poke around and take advantage of the game's systems, to sneak, fight, or hack your way out of a little puzzle box. You even have the option of bypassing sections of the game by hiring Sid to drop you closer to your objective. I think it's sort of reductive to this game that's already starved for content, but the option is considerate. Harvey Smith would describe this with terms like emergent narrative or authorial control. Where JC went down a mostly linear path that allowed for some variables, Alex can choose to swear allegiance to whichever faction they want. Cool, very cool idea, and I do appreciate the variables at play here, how whole characters live or die by your decisions. It's just kind of weird that you can, for the most part, still do all of the tasks in the game. At certain points, plot elements will change, but it's not like you're going to want to replay the game over to see these subtle divergent paths. It's not often that content will be kept from you so much as it will no longer be relevant, and there will be no narrative or beneficial reason to pursue it. For example, when you arrive in Cairo looking for Dr. Nassif, the WTO wants you to search for clues to her whereabouts at her impoverished family's greenhouse, and then burn it to the ground on account of it not having the proper paperwork filed for operation. Cool, right? Sounds like cool guys I want to hang out with. The Order wants you to seek out her uncle, Maskini, in his meager apartment and interrogate him. If you do the latter, you learn that Layla Nassif has a cousin named Eva enrolled in the Tarsus Academy for Girls, but she's gone missing. Even though he knows his family is targeted by every faction in town, he's had no luck getting answers about the whereabouts of Eva, so Moschini agrees to let Alex try, and hands over his parental visitation pass. This is some of the more interesting side content in the game. You'll learn about a group of girls, including Eva, who have created a little shelter inside the school's ventilation system, and have uncovered that the headmaster is a Templar plant that plans to murder the next batch of students deemed viable for biomodification. It's a neat micro story to have within this story, but as far as the main quest goes, it's a dead end on the search for Layla. You can reunite Eva with her father and be rewarded, but the conclusion drawn from all this is that it was a complete waste of our fucking time. But if you instead listened to the WTO because you're just that heartless that you'd willingly burn down this poor family's livelihood just so an enclave of pampered dickheads don't have to look at it anymore, Moschini is obviously going to be less likely to trust you and won't give you his visitation pass. But just like all Nintendo products, you can also just steal it. Even if you've already picked up the trail of Layla Nassif and then stole this pass, Donna Morgan will be like, huh, maybe we should have looked into that. Oh well, at least Layla's family will die destitute and penniless. I'm a completionist. I'm a hardcore gamer, right? Right? I'm asking you. I don't know who let's say I am. So I want to experience all the side content for every faction. I want every character consistently mad at me for not doing the thing they want me to do. I hate myself.
You've shown appalling judgment, Alex.
In similar games, this would of course also provide some kind of material gain, some experience, maybe some upgrades perhaps. Invisible War further does away with the already light RPG elements of the previous game, so all you really get from completing tasks is money. If you do all the tasks and rob all the ATMs, you'll have so much money. You'll never have money problems. You can buy whatever you want, and the only thing you're gonna wanna buy is biomod canisters to upgrade your abilities. But you also just find a shitload of these littered all over the labs and layers you're crawling through. Some people just give them to you as well, like, hey, I don't know what this thing does, but it seems like your jam.
Please, Alex, save Paul.
Oh, is that a biomod canister? Thanks.
You don't need to buy weapons or their upgrades, as those are also plentiful, especially if you have the eye biomod maxed out, because you can just see them highlighted in their hiding spots. I'm realizing I have a lot of criticism that can be summed up as I think you become overpowered way too quickly in this game. I actually stopped using the eye biomod and respect halfway through because I realized I was just using it like a cheat code, like a hack, and I felt a sensation I so rarely feel. I felt like the game should be harder. Like, you're just fucking good at everything. It's almost like there should be some kind of skill system in place to regulate what you can and can't do. And I suppose it's like, it's hard-coded in the story that you're the perfect being, the number one fucker. So yeah, you would just steamroll everyone.
Let's just say I have a few tricks up my sleeve.
So you're modified?
Yep, some of the best new tech. Probably even some stuff you don't have yet.
Oh, see you in the funny papers. Once you get a silenced sniper rifle, there's little reason to use literally any other weapon until the final stretch. I'm just clicking on heads out here and watching these bozos do cartwheels. I gotta say, it's gonna sound like sarcasm, or like I'm being hyperbolic. But I cannot understate how amusing this game's ragdoll physics are. I don't even think headshots are more or less effective. I just do it because it launches them head over heels over head over heels. The early to mid 2000s were the peak of ragdoll physics. We never got here again, to this floppy but still kind of rigid noodle place. The amount of time I spent just picking up bodies and throwing them into the environment to laugh at how they flopped into it, I won't disclose, because I literally could not calculate it. I'm not being funny. This is a selling point.
If I were a tyrant.
The novelty of its physics have really not worn off on me. I still get a kick out of how much of an oaf you can be. Just stomping around areas, swiping shit off countertops, and toppling over trash cans. It almost makes up for how floaty and jerky it can feel a lot of the time. One of the most maligned additions is the concept of universal ammo. All weapons in the game even some melee ones, draw from the same pool of ammo. When you find ammo still depicted as a magazine, it's filling a bar that is still for whatever reason segmented as multiple magazines, despite the reloading process happening automatically without any animation or interruption of any kind. The idea has an in-game explanation. It's the result of Mako Ballistics just having a monopoly on munitions production, but it's still so video gamey that it's hard to visualize how this would work. How is it that the same bullets that come out of my pistol can power a stun prod or a rocket launcher for that matter? What does that look like when it's happening? What am I doing to make that happen? Am I doing anything? The real excuse for this was that they thought it would avoid scenarios where you'd be stuck without ammo. On some level, it makes sense that if you can pick up any ammo and use it, you'll have more of it. But weapons consume different amounts of it, so if you run out of ammo with one, you run out with all of them. It's really more of a lateral move than anything else, and if I had to guess, they just didn't want the headache of having to deal with balancing an economy of ammo for all its weapons. It's more numbers to keep track of, and more items to have in the environment. I suppose they could have just had a shop that you could buy gun stuff from, like you already can from the Omar traders. It's already there. Then I'd have something to spend my vast wealth on. See, any complaints this game received, even my own complaints, I'll admit, are for the most part small. They just cause a slowly spreading spiderweb of other questions, and they all seem to be in direct conflict with things that the original got right. It's bizarre how a game could be so groundbreaking and ahead of the curve, and its follow-up be made to address the things that awarded it such platitudes. Most issues I have with Invisible War are dwarfed by the frequency of loading, which is honestly something I'm not one to complain about, and something you'd think would be amended simply by being on PC. I mean, the game's like 1,000,000 years old. You'd think its loading screens would be like a blip, a fraction of a second. But in reality, it's somehow created a different kind of issue in its compromising. The game is made of really small areas compared to the previous game. You'll be walking down a street, see a coffee shop, and need a loading screen to walk inside it. For whatever reason, the way this was ported to PC requires the game to open a new instance of itself every time you do this, while closing the previous one with a launcher still open, which can take longer than I'd like, and sometimes it just wouldn't make it past this process, hanging on a black screen until I had to close it in the task manager. Also, this isn't a problem I imagine you'll have unless you plan on making Invisible War content, but the game doesn't seem to like overlays, and I use Shadowplay to record, so if I was recording with Shadowplay while entering a loading screen where it switches windows, it would 100% crash the game. My workaround, you ask? Why, stopping the recording at the threshold of every loading screen, my dear boy. You may be thinking, wouldn't this create a massive folder full of hundreds of 5 to 10 minute clips encompassing a 16-hour game? Yes. What? You want like a prize because you're good at math or something? And this is the main complaint, right? That the game was made for consoles and the PC version got screwed over. So naturally, I played it on Xbox because clearly that must be the optimal way to play it. On the platform it was developed to accommodate, even though it's not backwards compatible with any other Xbox, so fuck me, I guess. And really, the loading process winds up being kind of the same. I can just read the actual loading screen hints now. I don't know why I thought it would be different from my memory. I just felt surely the game would be best on the thing it was made for. My stupid 13-year-old eyes couldn't even tell that the frame rate falls apart anytime there's like more than 3 people on screen. Despite everything, I'm on this game's side. I think it's fun to play, especially in these short bursts where the limits of the stage disappear for but a beautiful moment, and you're just there, immersed, walking through a decrepit bar, lit only by dim bulbs hovering above slowly rotating fan blades, and an NG hologram dancing in the corner, being a sneaky freak, blasted up to their eyes in biomods and effortlessly dispatching a squad of rent-a-cops, only to realize there was a variety of other things I could have done instead. But is it a failing that shooting fellers in such a way makes them flip humorously? I say no. No, I say. I say no a 3rd time. Then I say no 2 more times, bringing the total to 5 no's, excluding that last one. Invisible War was a good experience. That's what I remember it to be, and primarily from an audio-visual standpoint. From the year 2000 and forward, game design would take these bounding cowboy steps forward, with every footfall punctuated by some kind of flash-in-the-pan graphic novelty. 2003 was the year that things like normal mapping were popularized, as well as dynamic lighting with harsh, striking shadows. I could see how it might seem silly now, but I remember walking into a basement area and bumping into a light bulb hanging from a string, and being in utter disbelief that it then swayed back and forth, throwing the shadows of some objects on a shelf hither and thither. Furthermore, I did it again a couple more times to reaffirm how impressive it was. This game was full of neat little graphic flourishes I hadn't seen yet, and honestly, it's still nearly as charming as it was the first time, although it could certainly use a more caring hand to restore some of its former beauty. I spent a whole day just fiddling with fan patches, just to get the UI to not be a vision-obstructing eyesore. This beauty comes with sacrificing some simple luxuries that the original had, such as reflections in mirrors, bullet decals, blood spatter, or smoldering burn marks from an explosion. But honestly, the ragdoll physics are distracting enough that I didn't even recognize that until I put pen to fucking paper. Ordinarily though, I'd be livid, especially if this was something I once had in a previous installment. The art style is a massive change, and in many ways, so is the general sense of design. Deus Ex was still very much grounded in a still recognizable near future. People were still adhering to the fashion of the late 90s and early 2000s, give or take a few leather dusters or tactical accessories. The world looked nearly identical to the year it was made. It was just dirtier, smellier, and every once in a while a person with a robotic arm would walk by. It was street level and scrappy in a way that is undeniably my shit. I love a shit world with one or two substantial technological leaps or alt history developments that cause unrest. Invisible War mostly drops the punk in cyberpunk and is openly, unapologetically, sci-fi. Right from the start, people are clad in futuristic jumpsuits. There are floating security bots patrolling the streets. The walls of the Tarsus Academy are decorated with a myriad of greeblies and holographic readouts. Even the Roombas got an upgrade.
Greetings.
They talk now. Certainly life in the WTO's enclaves is the definition of sci-fi excess. Man, look at those chairs. Actually, don't look at those chairs. Those are bad chairs. They do not prove my point at all. Fuck, man. Those were really bad chairs. The world's slums, its lower districts, retain some level of punk, just by virtue of the fashion sense and the state of disrepair, but the smooth, shiny look of the game's engine kind of works against it. Not saying that it looks bad because I love looking at this game, but it's not the same kind of grimy grittiness that was found in Battery Park or Hell's Kitchen. You're not going to be walking through tent cities with Zyme junkies scratching at their arms, or involve yourself in gang wars. What Invisible War does carry over successfully is its... What's that? Did you hear something? It kind of sounds like it's... time for the Roundup! What's up, my little rats? Welcome to the segment I write exclusively at 1 a.m. with not a drop of energy left. I'm pleased to report that just as its predecessor featured many rats in their natural habitats, just squeaking up a goddamn storm, skittering around like small furry men. Invisible War carries on the tradition and even gives the little guys a visual makeover to very mixed results. They look a little more ornery, a little more sickly and odd, even got some blood red eyes, but still every bit of joy to see. If you don't get a little hit of dopamine every time one of these adorable little fuckers just cruises by, foraging street pizza, whistling the song of their people, then I don't know what to tell you, and you should probably get pancreatic cancer. They don't do much else besides look cute as hell. You can follow them around, circle them a bit. At one point, I protected a few of them from a greasel attack. It's not really part of the game, but I suppose it's more of that emergent narrative that Harvey Smith talked about. Yeah, come to think of it, I think this was precisely what he was talking about. As you know, this segment is reserved for rats, or bats, but I think I could bend the rules to include some pretty choice birds. They look like shit, and I think that's why I love them. Like some kind of walking burlap voodoo doll of a pigeon, you know? Just magnificent. So I give the rats my highest rat roundup rating.
Oh, Zed. Zed is enough.
This is murder. Oh my god.
Good. Plus bird. The legacy left by Deus Ex was not one of complete unironic reverence. In fact, I'd wager an ever-growing population of gamer hatchlings primarily know of the game through memes. Memes centered solely around the game's monotone voice acting. This was something the team at Ion Storm seemed to want to rectify immediately. One of the early interviews with the team from GameSpy even has the interviewer plainly ask, "Can we expect better voice acting?" To which design lead Ricardo Bear responds, "We certainly don't want to have worse voice acting than the first game," oblivious to the eventuality that it would become arguably the game's most enduring hallmark, for good or ill. In this same interview, they'd throw out some names of who they were in talks with to voice characters in the game, now that they had a bigger budget and could afford real actors instead of just making their QA team do Chinese accents. Harvey Smith says, "We've approached Elijah Dushku and Kiefer Sutherland, as well as Christopher Lee, and well, nobody's gotten back to us, but that's the pool of quality we're swimming in now." By now, you've probably figured out that none of these screen actors are in Deus Ex Invisible War, but that's not to say the game doesn't have a quality voice cast of actual voice actors this time around. Guy Alex is played by Chris Sabat, who you've probably heard if you've ever listened to a dub of an anime.
Hi, what's going on? It looks like this facility is under attack.
His career is, in a word, invasive. He's like the Nolan Baker of anime, and yet his credits are still far exceeded by Laura Bailey, who voiced Lady Alex. Both do an admirable job of voicing a Deus Ex protagonist, a job that requires you to express a sliver of personality, but not enough to dissuade you from immersing yourself into their perspective, a roundabout way of saying a little stiff.
Hi. What's going on? It looks like this facility is under attack.
It is a talent, I think. They are both doing a thing and nailing the thing. It probably doesn't help that they seem less expressive, or maybe too expressive, and stuck with that expression. And the expression is a sort of wandering-eyed bewilderment.
Just kidding. Listen, I'm serious. You didn't hear the explosions? I saw a guard killed right in front of me on the apartment level.
A problem that probably could have been amended with a pair of shades like JC.
Just kidding. Listen, I'm serious. You didn't hear the explosions? I saw a guard killed right in front of me on the apartment level.
And perhaps they were a bit overzealous with their estimation of the voice cast budget, because there were a few roles handed out to the dev team. In fact, one of the best voices in the game, the Omar Trader, was given to Ricardo Bear.
It is foolish to pass up this opportunity, but that is your choice.
Ultimately, its cast is reflective of what a game's cast should look like. That is to say, it's full of voice actors and not stunt-casted screen actors. Speaking of pulling double duty, the original composer for Deus Ex, Alexander Brandon, would be brought in once again, this time to handle not only the music, but most of the sound design and effects as well. On top of that, he also serves as the new voice of Tracer Tong, a Chinese scientist previously voiced by this guy. Sometimes the snake eats its own tail.
You're Tracer Tong.
I see that Dr. Nassif didn't exaggerate about your mental acuity. Yes, I'm Tong. I suppose you will be wanting some answers.
Mirroring the visuals, the soundtrack for Invisible War is a little more glossy with a sci-fi sheen. It's a touch more cinematic and analog. It's just a bit more expensive sounding, but maintaining that sneaky, noir, mysterious vibe to it. It's ominous, futuristic, and a little bit militaristic as well. It's kind of a shame that because game areas are so small, you don't usually have a whole lot of time to really soak it in before it's changed to something else. It really shines in the Seattle and Trier levels. There is this clear division between being in the upper class areas and the slums. It's like the vibe becomes sadder and oddly sentimental, as though it were mourning the loss of this neighborhood. Each level does have a distinct sonic palette it plays with, and predictably, the Cairo level incorporates a genre of video game soundtrack that I will, on the surface, roll my eyes at, but inwardly really enjoy. And that is what some refer to as... that summons to mind all the imagery you would associate with that. A camel chewing on something, a vulture flying overhead, the air rippling with heat, and a man at a wooden stall saying, "Greetings, traveler." I think my favorite vibe may be Antarctica, especially with the added wrinkle that the area was included as an homage to The Thing. It does sound at least, like a legitimate horror level. I don't think it fully accomplishes that in gameplay or narrative, but the vibe of an Arctic research center besieged by creatures is there. I'm picking up on the notes of it. There are a few times when the game makes a stab for horror, and it's actually kind of sweet, trying to cultivate a particular atmosphere, elicit a certain response in what is essentially a series of little studio spaces. One such anomaly that always stood out to me is the room above the Nine Worlds Tavern in Trier, where if you play your cards right, the Omar trader will show up, but if you break in there before they get there, the room is clearly ransacked. There's this extra spooky ambience and the shadow of a woman cast on the wall from a flickering lamp. You'll find the source is an NG Resonance action figure. They never go for that air of supernatural again, but I always hoped they would. Alexander Brandon would come out sometime later to say that the soundtrack for Invisible War was not what he wanted it to be. That Ricardo Bear pushed Thief the Dark Project as a reference point, which led to a sparse and subdued stealth-centric soundtrack, when by virtue of being an immersive sim, the soundtrack should have reflected variety and been more dynamic. A bit of inward and outward criticism that I can respect, as it must have been annoying to have done the previous game's soundtrack and then be told to wipe the slate clean and start over, save for the main menu motif. Last, but certainly not least, maybe most actually, the opposite of least, is the addition of LA industrial duo Kidney Thieves, the heartbeat of any of the scummy bars you'll find yourself in. This is completely emblematic of a certain era where the music I regularly listen to even now received mainstream recognition in media and in pretty appropriate venues as well. Licensed tracks from the band's first album, Trickster, play out of holographic jukeboxes, but not as the band Kidney Thieves. They are repurposed as the music of future pop star NG Resonance, and to further meld the two together, NG is voiced by the vocalist for Kidney Thieves, Free Dominguez. Kind of odd that they had just released an album at the time called Zero Space that you'd think they'd want to do like a cross-promotion sort of thing, but either way, big respect, because that album is Please don't copyright claim me. I just wanted to show a tiny bit of the fucking song so you can see how sick it is. That's all I'm trying to do. Go buy the album. You want me to shill for Kidney Thieves? I'll do it. And another thing. You ever just... God. It's just that there's no reason why this video should be this long. There's no good reason. I think this video is actually playing into mental illness, but I want to say... It's sad that this is one of the first PC games I got that was in the smaller box. And it was not Game of the Year, but it was the sequel to Game of the Year! Video game packaging has mirrored my enthusiasm in the industry, just shrinking smaller and smaller until it disappears into nothing. All gone. Goodbye. Not even a StarCraft battle chest in sight.
You good, big dog?
But I'm over it. While the iron was hot and nobody had that long to put to words what they didn't like about Invisible War, numerous attempts would be made to quickly cobble together a third mainline Deus Ex game. One began to sprout during Invisible War's production, when a Valve programmer named Art Min would be hired specifically to work on a new Deus Ex, and in a repeat of Spectre passing the baton prematurely to Smith, this programmer would be handed the position of project lead for a game called Deus Ex Insurrection. Warren Spector would contribute 6 loosely brainstormed outlines for possible plot lines to pick up the Deus Ex story. What scraps of this I could find seemed to point to these ideas being mostly all prequel ideas that would take place more directly after the end of the first game, during the collapse. One idea concerns a man named perfectly, I might add, Xavier Gale, a mech-augmented Black Ops guy that becomes disillusioned with his increasingly sketch duties as part of an elite squad called Black Rain, including facilitating the smuggling of the street drug Zyme, and installing a puppet government during pandemic-related uprisings.
Editor's note, which is me, I just wanted to say the concept art for this character looks like it was probably inspired by Illyria from the show Angel, because the season she shows up in would have been airing around the same time of this game's development. I just thought you should know that I know that. Yeah, I can let go of your arm now.
The main arc would concern a VersaLife experiment gone wrong and Gale's daughter being kidnapped in order to pull him back into the business. Another idea has you playing as a kid, practically, who lies their way into a Nevada militia during the collapse. This would have you revisit Area 51 as you search for some hope of putting civilization back together. Over the course of the story, your sister becomes indoctrinated into a religious sect called the House of the Righteous. She disappears and their house of worship seems emptied. Suddenly, your command back at the militia designates the house a threat and orders the building be burned to the ground. You are then roped into hunting the cult down and even posing as a fresh convert with them, milking your sister for information. I don't like the way those words were put so closely together. Interestingly, there is a note at the bottom of this page suggesting that with some slight tweaking, this same plot could be used as a direct sequel to Invisible War. Art Min would unfortunately not take into account the ideas thrown out by Warren Spector and would instead suggest a prequel to the first Deus Ex game that, funnily enough, parallels what Eidos would wind up doing with the Deus Ex Human Revolution, despite nobody on that team being aware of these unused design documents. In this one, you'd play as Blake Denton, the man who would go on to father JC and Paul Denton, though early concept art for this protagonist refers to him as Adam Denton, which is eerily similar to Human Revolution's Adam Jensen. He was gonna be like a badass Delta Farce commando guy, and on a secret assignment in Colombia, something which Spector takes issue with in his notes, suggesting Mexico would make more sense than the established canon, he would get blowed up, but he wouldn't die. He'd be saved due to exposure to experimental nanotechnology of unknown, possibly alien origin. The game would depict how nanotech biomods even became a thing as the US government began reverse engineering them off his body. The main conflict would come about when they learned that the technology came from debris that fell from space and landed in several different countries, allowing the world's superpowers to develop literal superpowers. Blake has to race around the globe, making sure no other superpower capitalizes on the advanced tech, while presumably developing trust issues with his own government. Aside from the extraterrestrial element, which is in itself pretty massive, this was meant to be a return to roots after Invisible War. The rest of this sounds really soft sci-fi. It's all political and military thriller. This was to be a story driven by paranoid theories, betrayal, hatred, and devotion, following a more traditional mission-based structure instead of the hub worlds of the last two games. But a new addition would be a sort of home base where you would change your loadout, organize your team, and just vibe in between missions. Ultimately, this project that would have used Invisible War's engine made it far along enough to have concept art, some new AI behavior programmed, but in late 2004, Warren Spector left Ironstorm to pursue other endeavors, and according to Min, the project died pretty much immediately with his exit, and he soon left as well. Though I guess there were no hard feelings because they founded Junction Point Studios together a year later. While Insurrection was in pre-production, a fourth Deus Ex game was also in the works, a spin-off title that would be a tactical first-person shooter called Deus Ex Clan Wars. While this game would also use Invisible War's engine, it would address some issues with Invisible War by making levels larger, having less dialogue, and would complement the timeline presented in Insurrection, sitting in between Deus Ex and Deus Ex Invisible War as an interquel. This game technically was released, only late in development it began to stray from what the team felt a Deus Ex game should be, and by the time anyone saw a frame of it, it was reworked as a new IP titled Snowblind, and then finally Project Snowblind. This game was developed by Crystal Dynamics, and I don't quite know how it was meant to fit into the canon, but I'd wager it wouldn't be too hard to work backwards and figure that out. Early concept art makes it pretty clear what this game was meant to be, and design documents do refer to this guy as Dixon Denton, an augmented part of a Liberty Coalition and a militia called Republic want to trigger a Dark Age using an EMP weapon. I'm not sure if having Project Snowblind just be a part of the Deus Ex mythos would harm or help the franchise, but it's kind of a bummer that the world was not ready to do sex with Dixon Denton.
What did you see?
They killed a baby.
Aha! Ritual sacrifice.
Illustrating both how competitive and prone to infighting Ion Storm was, and how desperate the studio was to get another Deus Ex out. As the hammer seemed to be dropping on their studio, a third Deus Ex prequel was also in production, running parallel to Insurrection, and it came to be the more fleshed out cancelled project simply by living longer. This one would be pitched by Jordan Thomas, the lead designer for Thief 3 Deadly Shadows, who had dreamed of contributing anything to Deus Ex. Thomas would describe the culture during this period as an auteur cult built around specific personalities, an entire studio of the same kind of guy that had been told they were the top fuckers and who had all been filtered through the Looking Glass school of thought. When Warren Spector left, they realized he was sort of the arbiter of how things operated. He nodded knowingly to their pitches and circled bits of their proposals with an arrow pointing to the word, "Huh?" And they were left without a father figure. Jordan's team didn't even see the design documents for Insurrection until it had been officially cancelled. Of these ideas, this one seems like the hardest loss, because it was so clearly penned by someone with a deep passion for Deus Ex. He made its development a sort of personal dragon, and it's honestly an insanely creative idea as well, making it that much more of a bummer that he never caught it. Art Min's idea, in comparison, feels really safe and like trying to rekindle the atmosphere of the first game, backspacing the focus testing notes while continuing to focus on accessibility. Jordan Thomas's Deus Ex 3 would have been open world, taking place entirely in a freely explorable cyberpunkified New Orleans. Instead of going around to waypoints and collecting tasks to accomplish, missions would come from a generative system that reacted to your actions in the world, something he would come to compare to Far Cry 2. Again, you'd play as JC's father, this time a discarded, augmented experiment that is left for dead, your visible mechanical bits showing and freaking out people because the technology isn't public knowledge yet. You look like a Terminator freak with exposed circuits and gears and shit. This would force you to stick to the shadows, keeping a low profile, leaping from rooftop to rooftop, with the Nosferatu gameplay in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines cited as a reference point. Over the course of the game, you rise in power and modification until you are led right back to the same assholes that tossed you aside. In this game, nobody was immortal. You could literally kill any character in the game, but important ones would be sort of downloaded and preserved in your brain. Concept art shows locations like a grimy casino and a downtown strip cluttered with holographic advertisements. There's also quite a few more horror-themed transgenic enemies, further displaying the darker tone they seem to be toying with. Also Monkey, a lot of this game was written down, but Thomas became skeptical when Eidos refused to allow them to use a different engine than Invisible Wars. The publisher wanted all their games to use the same engine, but most reviews of Invisible War included plenty of complaints that pointed back to its engine, so they didn't see the point in revisiting it. After a rough prototype of what the combat would look like, Eidos wound up shuttering Ion Storm, as it was already hemorrhaging staff after Warren Spector's exit. In an interview with Eurogamer, Jordan Thomas seems genuinely hurt that Ion Storm fell apart, and that after coming close to his dream, he instead experienced the back-to-back flops of Invisible War and Deadly Shadows, leaving the interview by saying, "There's a reason the place closed, and it was chiefly hubris. There are many people who will tell you that the publisher fucked us, but no, the method failed. Making a smaller, more intimate Deus Ex was on nobody's mind, including mine." If it's any consolation, he was then hired at Irrational to work on BioShock and continued to do so until that studio was dissolved. I don't know, it's a disquieting narrative really. I tend to deify dreamers and demonize publishers, corporate dillweeds that stomp on the creative type's dreams, but it's an interesting perspective to see how that can become toxic and dreadful with a lack of guidance. When you handpick a team of main characters that all know they are the best of the best and ask them to work together and get a group project done, they needed guys like me, guys that barely participate or talk and then call in sick the day of the presentation.
What's your neighbor watching now?
Huh?
I mean, what are you picking up with your cursed nanotech augment?
Oh no, I pissed those out.
You can do that?
Yep, just right in the toilet.
That sounds bad. Like, are you feeling...
Oh, no, I have a UTI, like, no doubt.
Oh.
Yeah.
Damn.
Does Monster have a cranberry flavor?
Googling.
0 sugar, please? I wish I'd never bought this mess. I didn't do my research and thought that it was the same sort of thing as the first Deus Ex, or even the third. But this is something that was dumbed down for consoles and boiled in the dubious soup of early 2000s aesthetics, rather than really having anything to do with any of the other games in the series. How much did you pay for this, big dog? Well, like $1? You spent the same amount as, like, including a cup of dipping sauce with your lunch order, and you got the gall to complain? I don't mean to sound dramatic, but the fact that you didn't enjoy this game, let alone play it for at least an hour, is all your fault. And then you just kind of make some shit up at the end there because you didn't play the game. That dubious soup of 2000s aesthetics, which by the way is infinitely, cosmically more interesting than our bizarre and misguided obsession with photorealism, actually has everything to do with the other game in the series, because it's the second game released in the franchise. It's a direct sequel to the one that came before it and concerns the events of that game. I really need you to start doing your research because it's clearly creating a lot of confusion in your thinking. This game is bad and the creators should feel bad. This has more in common with Star Trek and the sci-fi original picture Living Hell than Deus Ex. It's crippled by being Xbox native. The story is bad and full of holes so large you could comfortably stunt fly in Antov AN 225 Maria through... Okay, I get it. You like planes. Which is shocking with how overcompressed and oversimplified it is. Bad resolution, bad vibes, incoherent narrative, and a world-ending event with 0% chance of survival somehow contained magically to one city then barely addressed or explained. I wish I'd never wasted money on this pile of unrealistic, outside-of-universe, oversimplified pile of dog shit excuse for a sequel to a game it has barely anything to do with. You know what I think? I think this was never meant to be Deus Ex. I think it was entirely a separate game with its own story, and halfway through they realized it was never gonna sell without a name of a franchise on it. It's like a bad knockoff of Mass Effect. Every mechanic or story element that made the original good is gone, and even the fighting is oversimplified, as if they are calling players, wow, this year? Don't buy this game. Just pretend it doesn't exist and move on to Human Revolution. You'll thank me later. If you're playing games looking for plot holes, like, we're not the same. But having said that, I think it's a perfectly coherent narrative. If anything, I wish it were a bit more complicated and had more to say about the socio-political messages it wants to examine. I'm guessing the world-ending event contained in one city you're talking about is the inciting incident, the destruction of Chicago, which is like one of the central mysteries in the game's setup, and without spoiling what happens, it wasn't a world-ending event, it was a terrorist attack on a single location. The perpetrators of this attack purposefully selected a location to destroy and destroyed it. This is why it was contained, non-magically, to one city. I mean, this is a sci-fi game with impossible technology. It's a story that concerns upgrading yourself with nanomachines. There's gonna be stuff that is, by the standard of our real lives, magic, I suppose. Point is, the people responsible for this event and their motivations are made painfully clear by the end of the game, which you didn't get anywhere close to. It's odd how many of these bring up that it has nothing to do with Deus Ex, or that it's outside of universe, when it has like the most to do with Deus Ex. It's quite literally the conclusion to the world of Deus Ex at the moment, at least. It picks up after the things in the first game happened, and even concerns many of the same characters from that game. It's just slow to reveal how intertwined they are. They were doing a thing. They wanted time to cook that you didn't give them. That's on you. As far as your theory that this was not meant to be a Deus Ex game until halfway through development, I don't know if that was hyperbole on your part, but that is simply, provably, undeniably untrue. Would that fix anything if it were true? Would that put your mind at ease? Either way, the game is here. It's got Deus Ex on the box, and it's high time you accepted that. This game isn't very good, it's goofy, and the protagonist sounds like AI. Yeah, I'd actually agree this game is a bit goofy, but so is the last one, and so are a lot of great games. Goofy is a quality. Goofy is love. Goofy is life. Goofy is a dog. Gorsh. Also, I get they're saying that the voice acting sounds like AI to imply that it's robotic or monotone, but it's just kind of unsettling to think how rapidly that comparison is no longer applicable. It's honestly worrying how human AI can sound. Would it totally blow your mind if I told you that for the last 2 minutes, My voice has been in AI. Isn't that crazy? It's not true, but it would be crazy if that were true, right? Now, every time I try to make an AI of my voice, I just sound like a fucking paranormal content sex pest.
Hello? Who's this guy? You see what I mean? I sound like a lobotomized Chills.
Don't. Just don't. I played and beat this game when it came out back in the day and thought it was alright because there wasn't much else to do back then. What the fuck are you talking about already? There wasn't much else to do back then. You're talking about 2003, like we lived in Roman decadence, having indulged every excess until we had become numb to worldly pleasures. Actually, there was shit to do. Tony Hawk's Underground came out that year. Put some respect on the name. Nowadays, you've got so many other better things to play, things that probably have better voice acting, better gameplay, better writing. It tries to recapture the conspiracy and gray areas the first game built up, but instead just feels like it's rehashing all of it from a different angle. Go watch a no commentary let's play of the first 30 minutes, and if it seems appealing, by all means have at it. Okay, I mean, the last part is like fair enough. I feel like that's solid advice for anyone with no video game literacy. I think a lot of people have this unspoken cutoff point where a game becomes old and thus not worth your time. And this is likely a young person's opinion. I guess you see this in other mediums, but mostly video games, where there's this constantly shifting standard of subjective quality you come to expect. But I think that's simply a stupid idiot mindset. That's all. Only thing making this game good is the ragdoll physics. You know what? I got nothing but respect for that. We can agree on one thing. This is not a bad game per se. It is just inferior to the first Deus Ex game in every aspect. The universal ammo system makes zero sense unless the ammo is made up of nanites, which still makes zero sense considering the huge cost of manufacturing. The level design is cramped, making you feel claustrophobic in a bad way. The levels are just so small, it feels most of the biomods are useless, at least unused for most part of the game. It is just so mediocre on every level, considering it is the follow-up to one of the greatest games in gaming history. This is just a huge letdown. Sorry, JC, this one gets a thumb down. Okay, see, I can't knock that, because that's instinctively what I did. Like, I understand universal ammo as a mechanic decision. I don't really agree with its implementation, but I understand the developer's reasoning for it from a strictly game design theory standpoint. That said, it's a tough thing to visually or narratively make sense of. Like, what is the ammo exactly, and how is it changing shape? It would be one thing if they just said it was like a universal battery and all weapons in the future were, you know, charged railgun devices with different utility, but Mako Ballistics makes these things implying some kind of ballistic projectile, you know? Anyways, I agree, compared to Deus Ex, it feels restrictive where I once had so much freedom. I could run around in circles, flailing my arms every which way, with little care for who I bludgeoned near fatally. But sadly, in Invisible War there is far from enough room to open up this pit. But it's also just impressive to me how much they managed to compress the design principles of Deus Ex. In its own way, it's pretty neat how they distilled its ideas into a digestible little treat, like a Halloween-sized Milky Way. Just the right amount of ingredients for me to glue my teeth together and feel like I've initiated a dubious science project in my gutty works. No location radar? I enjoy both Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. Thought to try this classic. However, I will not endure to play it. This game has for me the fatal flaw many FPS and TPS games have. No enemy location radar. Impossible to sense where enemies are. In real life, we take cues from more than just our eyes to sense what happens around us. Playing a game without location radar is like living life with blinders on, forcing concentration awareness forward only. In a stealth shooter game, it is imperative that I have 360-degree situational awareness. This game does not. I've never heard such an earnest, tough guy cope about a popular game mechanic that has no basis in reality. Look, I'm the last person that's going to shame someone for playing a game on easy or needing some kind of added accessibility, but I know that radars, where enemies show up as little blips with cones of vision, is included entirely because it would be too hard on players otherwise. Because in real life, sneaking into a place you ought not be is way more difficult than we're ready to admit. You try to pull half the shit that Adam Jensen does, and in seconds, a man with an unfulfilled wife and alienated son will shout, "Stop right there, motherfucker," and then tase you in the nuts until you have a stroke and die. And then they get sent on paid leave before being transferred to another precinct. It's a story as old as time. What an exceptionally awful game. Not only do you have to sideload another version of the game to get it to run right, the game is just overall terrible. Do you like linear level design that forces you to retrace your steps for every single mission or side quest? Do you love loading screens every time you open a door? Do you like a storyline that doesn't even match the outcome of the original game it's a sequel to? Do you love playing stories with characters you really just want to kill by the end of the game? Well, hot damn, this game is for you. I was really frozen on the sentiment. Do you like linear level design that forces you to retrace your steps for every single mission or side quest? I admit, I'm not a game developer. I'm not an expert in any field, but I hear the term linear level design, and when you put those words together, I tend to think of a game that's played by walking down more or less a straight path, a straight line to a destination. Half-Life 2, for example, seems like a relatively linear game. It's a forward-moving sequence. It's a road story. So saying you have to backtrack back and forth to side content would kind of betray that claim. Adding to that, there are painfully obvious moments where there are multiple paths to meet at the same objective. Not like a lot. It's a tiny game, but that is there. If you're trying to get into the Black Gate, you could sneak in through the sewers, or talk to the WTO leader and get him to tell the guards to let you in, or kill the guards.
I might have given you a key to the gate in the courtyard, but if you'd rather fight your way through a greaselness, I guess I can't stop you.
Oh shit. Well, now that you mention it, that's exactly what I want. I mean, there's plenty of things to complain about with this game. This is just kind of weird. You're kind of weird, I think. I think you're a weird person. Do you love loading screens every time you open a door? I opened plenty of doors without loading screens. Here's one from the first 3 seconds of the game after the opening cutscene. But, I can't know how far you made it in, so your mileage may vary. Do you like a storyline that doesn't even match the outcome of the original game it's a sequel to? I don't really get this point either, like it's 100% a game informed by the ending of the game before it. That reality becomes more and more clear as you play it. But again, do you love playing stories with characters you really just want to kill by the end of the game? Yeah, actually. And you know what? What's kind of cool? You can kill all of them. And the game just takes that into account and offers up a revised ending based on that. Also, because the AI is so jank, some of them will just run into gunfire and die anyway. Sounds like this is the game for me. When Invisible War was released, it was financially successful, and the majority of critics seemed to think it was a very good game with state-of-the-art lighting and physics. There was even a brief period when copies of the game would come bundled with GPUs. But maybe Invisible War's shelf life declined unusually rapidly during a period of insane leaps in technology and quality, and it became inexorably linked with disappointment, with failure. Comparing it to what games just a year later would look like seems needlessly cruel. But, I mean, come on. People are really dismissive and in some cases passionately bitter about this game. Even the fellers that made it. And I guess if your mission was indeed to be a worthy successor, I mean, you bungled that pretty catastrophically for a number of reasons. Some in and some out of your hands. I just don't think that deletes the game from the conversation. I don't think that means skip it. It's still worthy of a look, even if it's like a half out of focus side-eye, like when you're anticipating a jump scare in a spooky movie, only it's Paul Denton's mug. I don't think it failed to do what it set out to do. It introduced the franchise to a new audience and compressed immersive sim design down into something you could play on your couch. There are certainly concessions, compromises made. It's like a slice of a good pie, but it's mostly crust, you know? It's at a weird, skewed angle and not the normal triangle with the rounded end. Yeah. You know, fuck you. It was hard for me not to see the novelty in that. By design, it is not the same experience of Deus Ex, and thus not as good a game. But there are few games that are Deus Ex even now. As much as I would have loved simply another one, I knew that would be asking lightning to strike twice. I guess for me, it was never a matter of, is Invisible War a worthy successor to Deus Ex? This is a fool's question, worthy of a fool's answer. Like, yes. I just thought it was a fun little cyberpunk game that had subtle notes of another great game. Maybe at some point I felt bitter about the series being downgraded in some respects, but this was literally the era where I don't think a moment went by where I was starved for something to play. Us stinky boys were eating good in the early aughts. Also, I simply don't often form high expectations for anything, a self-defense measure that prevents me from really ever feeling disappointment about games. I can only be pleasantly surprised. This advanced thinking only only applies to video games. In all other aspects of life, I am stunted and feeble. For a long time, Invisible War had a very comfortable seat in my memory dungeon. My dank, decrepit, crushingly deep black well of madness and creation was... Oh, getting a calling to... There is a quaint beauty to its snapshot of an engine in flux. There's some excellent sound design. Oh, what is that? Who thinks of this sound? Who can even imagine what it's like shoving a biomod canister up your ass? There's some deeply, spiritually fulfilling physics on display. I see a sentiment repeated that Invisible War removed everything that made Deus Ex great, but I still see it there. If you squint like a compressed and deep-fried memory of it, ultimately I'm using the same parts of my brain that I used in Deus Ex, just in shorter bursts and interrupted by loading screens. I think I was in the perfect position to receive Invisible War, face down, ass opposed to something hindering or obstructing in some way. Blind to any sense of decay. I just understood that PC games and console games were different things, and this is the Deus Ex for consoles. The logic behind this in recent years is different, yet not dissimilar. I'm not angry at Invisible War. I have mixed feelings that resurfaced, not because its developers prioritized consoles, but because it lifted a screen memory and reminded me that this was maybe the first time I noticed this phenomenon. And since then, there's been no shortage of games with a wonky PC port that's prettier but broken in ways I can't fix, which is also what I'd describe as my type.
Basically, hindsight is 20/20, you know?
Yep. That's the end of the video! That's the end of the video. Thank you for watching it. If you liked it, please consider liking, subscribing, or doing a variety of other things you could do to help my channel. Like becoming a patron. You could do that out of the kindness of your heart, or you could do it because there are currently 2 videos on there that are only available to patrons. Neither are about video games, but spooky paranormal stuff. And I put a comparable amount of effort into those. So, you know, if you like the style of content I make, but you're not married to the idea of video games, you can check that out. I'm doing a bad job of selling it. I'll just show you like a clip of it, actually. I have this theory that Nick was kind of Zach's rock, his anchor, and once he left, he was unmoored, untethered. It's a near immediate turn to Dark Zach. You can see it in the smallest interactions.
Right now I'm standing on the very railroad tracks where this legend states that a school bus full of little children were all instantly killed when a speeding train sliced right through the center of it.
Okay, again, right now we're with Richard Sennett, and he's taken us over to the Padres quarters, and over here, this is where you actually saw a Greyhound dog.
Anyway, thank you for watching, and an extra special thanks to Ailing Uncle, 2Password for Kids, Agendine, Alexander Smith, Anarcho Himbo, Andre Perkins, Aparts 89, Apex, Bayard Brown, Beef Lightning, Ben Carnell, Ben Oliver, Big Abuela Energy, Black Pluto, Bolt Action Baja Blast, Close Quarter Wombat, D-Sky, Daphne Pittendry, Dark Raptor 86, Darkside Blues, Deluminati. Despite my own misgivings, I should feel proud of how far I've come and give myself a gentle but firm piss missile waxing. I feel like that usually ends differently. Dirt Person, Dr. Beard, Dos Days, Douglas Black, Dubby, Edgy, Edward Avila, Fart Mother, Frodo Ballbag, Gamma, Gunmancer, High Food Court, I Cook Bacon, Ludexa Alexander, Jack the Dave, Jared Bynum, Jay Alameen, Joseph Zanoni, Just Reshef, Carrot, Calfwin Amygdala, Conrad's Dilemma, Labor Delenda Est, Marcus Chaney, Marcy Bones, Massimar, Michael Schmidt, Morg Detrius, Necot the Brave, it's like 2 a.m. I shouldn't be yelling these as much as I am. Octo. Oh, take my own advice, please. Ona Hill, Philip Woolley, Proto Pesnipe, Rahul Kirthi, Roland, Saiko Gekido, Salvatore Tosti, Samuel Vanderplatz, Schlongva, Snapplefish, Sneakers 8B, Zovil Fucht, Zofil Abaglabe, Vodim Wieden Grasheimentia, Solko, Stephen Kick, Tech 923, Tessuyin, This Deal is Getting Better All the Time, Tustan, Where Am I? Help, Witless Moth, Worm, Zach Bishop, Board Loki, Claire Owen, Daniel Streb, El Jaguar, Eto, Ava Nerve, Giraffa, Hime Rowan. I'm really trying to think of a funny name involving goblins. Jeremy Silver, June Choi, Karen Rosenau, Catherine Graven, Lore, Mr. Alpackelton, Savvy Fave, Swood Operator, T-Dog 8083, 410,757,864,530 gay cops, A Hanging Chad, Albert Hunley, Alfred Correa, Aaron Isaias, Back to Bed, Bang Flang, Binary Vision, Brady the Sanity Tax Collector, Brozoof Jones, Cantankerous, Chimichanga Jones, Kodamite, David Offord, Durporzi, Drunken Badger, Eric Yowden, Fiona Summers, Fix My Brain, Grounded Valkyrie, James Andrew Perla Adams, James Snipes, Jetson Jampel, Nawang Lapsang Yeshe Tenzin Gyatso, J-Man DX, Mad Monty 98, Make It Raynor, Ophelia Fishwife, P Dizzle, Persian Air, Please Stop Treating Player Agency as a Negative, Leaning Left-Right Manually isn't a fucking cover system, it's basic movement, Raul Garcia, Robert Brandon, Rowdy Roddy Peeper, Royal Witches, Samuel Ward, Sorry I'm No Hero, Technica, T Stoney, 10-Beat, The Angry Pebble, The Condroid, There Are Other Worlds Than This, A Big Gay Rat, Ainsley Roth, Alistair Stewart, Alexander Olbrich, Alex F, Ali G, Alistair Grout, All the Nope, Andrew Light, Andrew Lubrano, Andy Krieger, Arbiter Numbers, Ashley Hillsman, Astro Shepherd, Atari Steed, Auspicious Whiskers, Barrick Zero, B-Top, Beef, Ben and Kara Dowling, Ben Sanders, Benjamin Payne, Best Tiger, Big Uggy Boy Dum Dum, Bindle, Bishy 93, Biddles 999999, Bivdub, Bohemian Nobody, Brams, Brandon Frost, Brett Weaver, Brody Gibson, Burps Wimbledon, Casey, Cerberus Arms, Colby, Colt of Lita, Daniel Chernovsky, Dapney, David Fromke, David Harpstrite, Dazed Clockwork, Devona Upperock, Dirty Space Rat, Do Vampire Cummies Taste Like Iron, Dongs.exe, Eddie BC, Electric Crowbar, Ethan Blue, Eudiptes, Every Day, Once a Day, Give Yourself a Putty, Eyeballzilla, Flame 5029 Neo 8, Fried Potato, Fuzzy Tingle Times, Game is Good, Gamour Wood, Gaming with Clarp Tarp, General Klazara, Ghoul Baby Bond, Goofy Touched Me, Grimby's My Big Baby Boy, Haley Bobella, Hey Would You Blow Me, Hentai McToon Boob. Alright. Settle down, class. High-Res Titan, Hitoshi-san, Holy House Profane Void, Hugo Upton, I Am Without Meaning, It is Gilgamesh, Mightiest of Nappers, who Patreons through me. I fart on my hands. I swear I didn't make this just to sub to Grimbeard. INTJ loves her INTP. Irish Wristwatch, Irish Wristwatch, Irish Wristwatch, Jake Desi, James Kelly, Jamie Faulkner, Jared's sexy older brother, Jeff Ladd, Jesse James, Joshua, Joshua David, Justin Darnell, Captain Ketchup, Carragera, Kelly O'Neill, Kevin Hale, Kind Raccoon, Crust Easy, Kurok the Famished One, Lori Kubri, Leland Miliokis, Leopold Gloom, M, Magic Meows, Mandalore Gaming, Mango Roxas, Marcus Klassen, Max Cohen, Mioang, Micah J. Best, Miles Phillips, M. Newcomb, More Sharks, Mother Destruction, Mr. Ducky Quack, Mystical Lint, Name Requires DLC, Nick Hill, Nick Hooper, Nick Timmons, Nikki Paradise, Nicholas Polster, Noel M, Nuclear Sun, Noel Rom, Oliver Marshall, Opichi Kostra, Palanquin Noble, Paranoid Vampire, Pathetically Hopeful, Paul Blart Mulgoth, Paul Fierce, Pazuzu, Philip Coffey, Picture, Pine Man, Projectile Jerkwagon, Replicant, Richard Bingus, Ruibisomem, Scofflaw, the Suckiest Scofflaw, the Sussiest Baka D, Surge Rom, Shadanon, Shade, Salatixo, Startide, Taro Milk Tea Latte, Team R, the Supervisor, Thick Formom, Treon Wretch, Trucker Donovan, Tutant Mean Age Needle Teedle, Two Legs, Vincent Cronin, Wolf Chalice Logician, Your Best Nigel Thornberry Impression, Zanga PF, Zdenek Benez, Zen, Ziwawi, Zagingu, and Zuli, the Little Blue Kobold, for being a patron, and the rest. Look, I'm not even going to talk about it, okay? I realize this took me a long time, and I realize there's no reason it should have. I mean, clearly there's a lot of it. I couldn't tell you whether that's like a positive or not, and I don't know why there's so much of it. Well, I hope you're doing alright. Okay? One of us has to. Anybody playing Starfield? In my life, I really only allow myself time to play one game for 1 hour a day, and I have to also be, on a stationary bike as I do it, so I don't feel like I'm completely wasting my time. And it's kind of surreal to be playing it. It feels like a game that exists from like another timeline, another dimension. There's a lot of mechanics and just options that have kind of gone over my head so far, but there's a lot to enjoy as well. My main problem is like, why does it keep wanting me to pick up so much shit and I can't carry any of it? And then like I can't even make my friends carry it. Like their inventory maxes out too. And then I was like, well, I'll put it in my ship, and there's like the little safe, and then that has like a capacity that I can fill as well. And it's like, do you want me to mine all these rocks or not? You know, it's hard to get.
Oh, thank you, baby. This is so cute. Slay. Gang, gang. You're a strong woman. Gang, gang. Gang, gang. Gang, gang. Gang, gang. Gang, gang. Gang, gang.